A 43-year-old retired Navy SEAL thought his aging German Shepherd still had one more mission left in him. But during a routine rescue exercise, the K9 suddenly refused a direct command for the first time in years. Instead of following his handler, Flint stayed beside a silent teenage boy no one realized was falling apart. That single act forced Beckett to face a truth he had been avoiding. The dog who once saved his life was growing old. Then a real child vanished in the northern Wisconsin forest, and Beckett had to choose between using Flint again or finally letting him rest. What happened next would teach a hardened veteran that sometimes the bravest act is not holding on, but knowing when someone has already given enough. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. Then like this video and subscribe to K9 Navy SEAL Stories. Morning came pale and gold over northern Wisconsin, slipping between white-barked birches and tall pines in long, narrow bands of light. Mist floated above the lake like breath over glass. The water was so still that the trees along the opposite shore seemed to grow downward into another world. Fallen needles softened the forest floor, and somewhere beyond the training field a raven called once, then fell silent. Beckett Rowan Hale stood at the edge of the tree line with one hand resting near the old military watch on his left wrist. At 43, Beckett still carried the unmistakable build of the Navy SEAL he had once been. 6'1", broad through the shoulders, lean and hard rather than bulky. His angular face had been sharpened by years outdoors, with a defined jaw beneath short, dark stubble and blue-gray eyes that had learned to study a room before entering it. His skin was sun-browned and slightly weathered. Dark brown hair, cut short in the practical military style he had never quite abandoned, was beginning to silver at both temples. He wore the same clothes he trusted for most days in the field, an old red and black flannel shirt with frayed cuffs over a light gray t-shirt, faded dark blue jeans, worn brown leather work boots scarred by years of mud and stone, and the watch that had survived more places than he cared to remember. Beside him waited Flint. The German Shepherd was 9 now, though at first glance most people guessed younger. Flint was black and tan, short-coated and powerfully balanced, with a deep chest, tight working muscle, erect ears, and amber-brown eyes that rarely stopped observing. A small old scar marked one ear. His black working harness fit close against his body without unnecessary straps or decoration. He had served beside Beckett for years. That history lived in the way they moved together. Beckett rarely needed to repeat a command. Flint rarely needed one explained. Ready? Flint's ears shifted forward. Beckett almost smiled. Yeah, stupid question. Across the clearing, members of the local search and rescue team finished setting a training scent trail through the woods. The morning exercise was straightforward. Flint would follow the scent of a volunteer who had walked a controlled route through approximately 3/4 of a mile of forest, crossed a shallow stream, and hidden near an abandoned logging track. It was the kind of problem Flint had solved hundreds of times. Elias Ward approached carrying a radio. Elias was 58, tall but wearier than Beckett, with the tough, rope-muscled frame of a man who had spent decades working outside. His sun-darkened face was long and deeply lined around pale blue eyes. Short gray stubble covered his jaw, and his graying hair had begun thinning at the temples. Before running the county search and rescue unit, he had spent years as a smoke jumper, dropping into wildland fires when sane men were usually moving the opposite direction. He wore a dark red rescue jacket over a charcoal Henley, charcoal outdoor cargo pants, hiking boots, and a simple technical watch. Elias had the irritating habit of saying very little and still making Beckett feel as if half his thoughts had been read aloud. Trail's ready, Elias said. Beckett clipped Flint to the starting line. Any tricks? Wouldn't be training if I told you. That means yes. Elias's mouth twitched. Maybe I'm finally learning from you. Beckett looked down at Flint. Find. The transformation was immediate. Flint lowered his head, checked the scent article, then moved forward with controlled urgency. Beckett followed. The dog worked beautifully. He ignored old deer tracks, crossed a patch of damp earth, corrected himself once when the wind pushed scent downhill, then recovered without Beckett interfering. 20 yards into the trees, Flint cleared a fallen birch. Not badly, not awkwardly, but Beckett noticed that the rear legs came over half a beat later than they would have 2 years ago. He said nothing. Another 100 yards. Flint stopped briefly beside a moss-covered stump, lifted his head, tested the wind, then continued. Still good, still Flint. When they reached a large pine trunk lying across the trail, Flint jumped. His front paws landed clean, the rear followed. Then he stood still for 2 seconds longer than necessary. Beckett watched. Flint stretched one rear leg behind him, just once. Then the dog moved on. Something tightened under Beckett's ribs. He recognized the feeling and immediately buried it. People who had worked with animals long enough learned that every hesitation did not mean injury. Every stiff movement did not mean decline. Dogs had sore mornings. Dogs landed badly. Dogs got tired. And Flint was fine. He was more than fine. 3 minutes later, Flint located the hidden volunteer beneath a stand of hemlocks. The team cheered from farther down the trail. Beckett rubbed Flint firmly behind the ears. "Good boy." Flint's mouth opened in a relaxed pant. His eyes were bright. "See?" Beckett told himself. Fine. Back near the training field, a small youth outdoor group had arrived to observe the second half of the morning exercises. Most of the teenagers clustered together around the equipment tables, loud in the effortless way of people who had not yet learned to be embarrassed by enthusiasm. One boy stood apart. Beckett noticed him because Flint noticed him. The teenager was perhaps 16, around 5 feet 8 or 9, thin without looking weak, dressed in a charcoal gray hoodie beneath a light brown canvas jacket, dark jeans, and brown hiking boots. His chestnut brown hair was slightly too long and fell toward his forehead. His face still held the narrowness of adolescence, and his pale skin made the faint shadows beneath his eyes more noticeable. His eyes were green-gray. They stayed mostly on the ground. His name, Beckett remembered from the briefing sheet, was Owen Cade Mercer, the son of a local rescue worker who had died 6 months earlier. Beckett knew no more than that. He had learned not to mistake knowing a tragedy for knowing a person. The group coordinator asked the teenagers to move closer. Everyone did except Owen. Flint looked toward him again. "Leave it," Beckett murmured. Flint returned his attention to Beckett for the moment. The next exercise involved moving between stations, demonstrating how search teams coordinated scent, radio communication, first aid, and navigation. Beckett finished explaining Flint's harness to 2 curious students. Then Elias called the group toward the next section of woods. Beckett turned. "Flint, heel." Flint did not move. Beckett took 2 steps before realizing the dog was no longer beside him. He looked back. Flint stood 10 feet away, beside Owen. Beckett frowned. "Flint." The dog looked at him. "Heel." Nothing. A few heads turned. That was unusual enough. In years of field work, Flint had ignored commands only when another trained response took priority, or when something in the environment demanded attention. Beckett stepped closer. "Flint, heel." Still nothing. The old familiar irritation rose quickly. Not anger exactly, but discomfort. Discipline was not about pride. Discipline kept people alive. It also kept dogs alive. Then Beckett noticed Owen's hands. They were trembling, not dramatically, just enough that the fabric around the cuffs of his hoodie quivered. The boy's jaw was tight. His breathing had quickened. One of the youth volunteers called his name. "Owen, we're moving." Owen did not answer. Flint shifted closer to him. The German Shepherd did not jump, did not lick his hand, did not paw at him. He simply pressed his shoulder gently against the boy's leg. Owen looked down. His fingers caught the top of Flint's black harness. For 1 second, Beckett saw something stark and terrified flash across the teenager's face. Then the boy's eyes lost focus, and Beckett understood. This was not defiance. It was not teenage attitude. Owen was trying not to come apart in front of everyone. "Back up," Beckett said. A woman hurried toward them. Owen? She was 41, medium height, around 5'6", with a compact, capable build and the tired posture of someone who spent too many hours taking care of other people. Her dark brown hair, naturally a little wavy, was pulled low at the back of her neck. Hazel brown eyes dominated a slightly long oval face that would have looked warm if fear were not tightening it now. Mara Mercer wore a dark navy quilted jacket over a cream sweater, dark jeans, brown leather boots, and a small brown shoulder bag. She worked as a regional hospital nurse Elias had mentioned earlier, and she was Owen's mother. She reached for her son. "What happened?" "Owen, look at me. Are you dizzy? Can you breathe? Tell me what." "Mara." Beckett's voice was quiet. She looked at him. "Give him room. He's my son. I know. He's not breathing right. I know." The words came sharper than Beckett intended. He softened his voice. "Give him 10 seconds. Mara's instinct fought him visibly. But her medical training won. She stepped back. Flint lowered himself to the ground. Owen went with him. The boy dropped to one knee, then both, still gripping the harness. Beckett crouched several feet away. He did not tell Owen to calm down. He had always hated that phrase, as if panic were a switch someone had simply forgotten to turn off. "Don't worry about us," Beckett said. Owen did not respond. "Just stay with the dog." Flint rested against the boy's leg. His breathing remained slow and regular. Owen's did not yet. But gradually the sharp little gasps began to lengthen. His grip on the harness loosened. The shaking decreased. Mara covered her mouth with one hand. Beckett watched Flint. No command had told the dog to do this. No exercise had required it. Flint had simply noticed something before any of them had, and for reasons Beckett could not yet name, that unsettled him almost as much as it impressed him. When Owen finally lifted his head, he did not look at his mother. He looked directly at Flint. Then, barely above a whisper, he said, "Did you know?" The dog's ears shifted. Owen swallowed. "Before I did?" Beckett felt a cold little movement in his chest. Because the boy had asked the question like someone who had spent months waiting for another living thing to notice the pain before he had to explain it. And Flint had. The exercise resumed only after Mara assured everyone Owen was medically stable. He refused to leave. He also refused to join the group. So Elias arranged for him to sit on a fallen log near the training area while Mara remained nearby. Beckett led Flint toward the equipment table. Elias followed. For a while neither man spoke. Then Elias said, "Dog didn't break." Beckett continued coiling a lead. He ignored 3 commands. He read the situation. He had a command. Elias folded his arms. "Beck." That tone alone irritated him. "What?" Flint saw a kid in distress. And he decided that mattered more than moving 20 yards because we were changing stations. Beckett looked at Flint. The German shepherd had settled beside the table, perfectly composed. He still has to listen. Elias was quiet. Then he said, "Or maybe you need him to always listen so you can keep believing everything is exactly the same." Beckett's hands stopped. His eyes moved slowly toward Elias. "Careful." "I am." That didn't sound careful. It sounded true. Beckett turned away. He hated that the comment landed anywhere at all. An hour later, training officially ended. The other teenagers headed toward the parking area. Mara spoke quietly with one of the program counselors, but Owen refused to join them. Instead, he walked toward Beckett. Flint was drinking from a collapsible bowl. Owen stopped several feet away. "What's his name?" "Flint." Owen nodded. "Because of fire?" "No." "Stone?" Beckett considered. "Because when he was younger, he could make sparks out of just about anything." A faint movement touched the corner of Owen's mouth. Almost a smile. "He do that with everyone?" "What?" "What he did." Beckett looked at Flint. "No." Owen studied the dog for a long time. "Why me? I don't know." That answer seemed to satisfy him more than a comforting lie would have. Mara approached. Up close, Beckett could see exhaustion behind her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Wasn't me." Her gaze moved to Flint. "Then thank him for me." Beckett looked down. "You hear that?" Flint drank. Owen said. "He seems overwhelmed by the praise." Beckett glanced at him. There it was again, a little dry edge. Beckett recognized it. "Yeah," he said. "Terrible ego problem." For the first time that morning, Owen smiled. It disappeared quickly. But Mara saw it. The expression on her face nearly broke something in Beckett. Not joy exactly, relief. The fragile kind people were afraid to touch because it might vanish. That evening, the forest around Beckett's cabin turned copper and black beneath the setting sun. The cabin stood near a smaller inland lake, simple and weathered, with a woodpile stacked beneath one side of the porch and a battered aluminum canoe resting upside down near the trees. Beckett parked. Flint jumped down from the truck, or tried to. His front paws landed on the ground. One rear foot slipped slightly beneath him. The dog recovered immediately. So quickly another person might have missed it. Beckett did not. Flint walked toward the porch. The first step was 12 inches high. Normally he cleared it without thinking. Tonight he paused, then jumped. The rear legs followed a fraction late. Flint shook himself and walked to the door. As if nothing had happened, Beckett remained beside the truck. His stomach had gone tight. "Flint," the dog turned. Beckett stared at him. Flint stared back. 2 veterans, 2 practiced liars. Both pretending time had not entered the room. The following morning, Beckett drove 25 miles to see Dr. Juniper Bell. June's veterinary clinic occupied a converted barn outside a small town, surrounded by maple trees just beginning to turn orange. June was 67 and stood barely 5'4". But Beckett had watched her physically reposition 80-pound working dogs with the confidence of someone who expected physics to cooperate. She had a round, lightly lined face, sharp, pale green eyes, and silver hair cut to chin length and tucked behind her ears. Her brown olive barn jacket covered a light blue chambray shirt, dark brown work pants, and low leather boots. Reading glasses hung from a cord around her neck. She had treated police dogs, hunting dogs, rescue dogs, and military working dogs for decades. More importantly, she did not scare easily, especially not of Beckett. Flint stood patiently while June examined his shoulders. "Weight looks good." She flexed one front leg. "Heart sounds good." Then the hips. Flint turned his head once. June noticed. Beckett noticed her noticing. "What?" "Nothing yet." "That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting until I'm finished." She worked down Flint's rear legs and tested range of motion. One side was slightly tighter. June stood. Early arthritis. Beckett folded his arms. How early? Early enough that I'm saying early, meaning he's 9. He's working. I can see that. He found a subject yesterday without difficulty. I believe you fast. June looked at him. Are you trying to convince me or yourself? Beckett's jaw tightened. June continued before he could answer. No long searches unless necessary. Less repetitive jumping. Shorter high-impact training. More recovery time. Swimming is good. Controlled walks. Keep his weight exactly where it is. Beckett stared at Flint. The dog was investigating a cabinet that probably contained treats, and start transitioning him out of field duty. Beckett looked back at her. No, June blinked once. I admire the detailed medical argument. He's not ready. I didn't say retire him this afternoon. He still has drive. Yes, he still works. Yes, he's not done. June's expression changed. Not softer, more precise. I never said he was done. Beckett said nothing. I said he's aging. That's not the same thing. I know. Then stop talking about him like he's broken. June took off her glasses, though she had not been wearing them. A habit Beckett had learned meant she was becoming serious. Beckett, listen carefully. Old is not a diagnosis. He looked away. She continued. I am not telling you Flint cannot perform. I'm telling you that you should not force him to prove he can still perform every single day just because you're afraid of what happens when he doesn't. Beckett's eyes hardened. You think that's what I'm doing? I think I've known you both long enough to ask. Silence filled the examination room. Flint finally found the treat cabinet and sat in front of it. June glanced toward him. At least one of you knows what he wants. Beckett did not smile. He asked, if he retires, what does he do? June looked genuinely confused. What do you mean? All day, walk. June, eat, seriously. Sleep in inconvenient places. Steal something you were planning to eat. Bark at a squirrel. Become emotionally devastated because you shut the bathroom door. Beckett stared. June shrugged. He becomes a dog. The answer struck him harder than it should have. Flint had never been only a dog. He had been structure, responsibility, partner, a reason to get out of bed on mornings when Beckett had wanted the world to disappear for a few hours. After leaving the teams, Beckett had discovered that civilian life had too much silence. Flint filled some of it simply by needing things. Food, exercise, routine, purpose. Beckett understood purpose. He knew what to do with purpose. Retirement was another word entirely. June studied him. The real question isn't what Flint will do. Beckett already knew what came next. He wished she would not say it. She did. What are you going to do? He clipped Flint's leash onto the harness. Thanks, June. That usually means you hated everything I said. Not everything. Which part did you like? The part where his heart is good. June sighed. Of course. On the drive home, Flint rested in the passenger side rear seat, head near the cracked window. Autumn light flickered over his face as pine shadows crossed the truck. Beckett drove in silence. At a stop sign, he looked back. Flint's eyes were closed. The silver beginning around his muzzle seemed more visible in the sunlight. Beckett faced forward quickly. He would reduce the jumping. Fine. He would shorten unnecessary training. Fine. More recovery days. Swimming. Whatever June wanted. But retirement? No, not yet. Flint still needed the work. That was what Beckett told himself. He did not examine why the thought made his chest feel hollow. That night, miles away, Owen Mercer sat on the edge of his bed with his phone in both hands. He had ignored 3 messages from friends, ignored one from the school counselor. Then he opened the contact Elias had given the youth group for scheduling questions. Owen typed, "Can I come back next week?" He stared at the screen, then added, "Only if Flint is there." He almost deleted it. Instead, he pressed send. At the cabin, Beckett knew nothing about the message. He sat on the porch beneath a cold sky while Flint slept at his boots. For once, the dog had no command to follow, and Beckett had no idea how much that frightened him. By the following Saturday, autumn had deepened across northern Wisconsin. The maples along the county road had gone red at their edges, while the birches had turned a fragile yellow that seemed almost luminous beneath the pale morning sun. A cold wind came off the lake in small, clean gusts, carrying the smell of pine needles, damp soil, and wood smoke from houses scattered far beyond the training grounds. Beckett Rowan Hale was checking the contents of a medical pack when Owen Mercer arrived. The 16-year-old did not come through the gate with the noisy confidence of the other teenagers. He walked beside his mother with his shoulders slightly rounded beneath the same charcoal hoodie and light brown canvas jacket he favored, dark jeans hanging loosely from his thin frame. Chestnut hair fell toward his forehead. The faint shadows beneath his green-gray eyes seemed a little darker than Beckett remembered. Mara Mercer walked beside him but did not touch him. That alone told Beckett something. The 41-year-old nurse wore her dark navy quilted jacket over a cream sweater, dark jeans and brown boots, her shoulder-length dark brown hair pulled back low. Her hazel brown eyes were alert in the habit of someone trained to notice symptoms. Yet there was a restraint in her this morning that had not been present before. She seemed to be making a deliberate effort not to ask her son whether he was all right. Owen looked past everyone, straight at Flint. The 9-year-old German Shepherd was lying beside the equipment table in his black working harness, black and tan coat bright in the cool sunlight. A little silver had begun creeping into the fur around his muzzle, subtle enough that most people missed it. His erect ears turned toward Owen before his head lifted. Owen stopped. Flint stood. No command passed between them. The dog walked over. Owen's shoulders lowered perhaps half an inch. Beckett noticed. He wished he had not. Elias Ward appeared from behind a county rescue truck carrying a clipboard. The 58-year-old search and rescue leader gave Owen a small nod. "Morning. Morning." It was barely audible. Elias glanced at Beckett. Beckett knew that look. He ignored it. Owen crouched beside Flint and scratched the thick fur beneath the dog's neck. "Hey." Flint sniffed the boy's jacket, then stood quietly while Owen touched the side of his harness. Beckett returned his attention to the medical pack. "You planning to join the navigation exercise today?" Owen kept looking at Flint. "I don't know. Compasses tend to work better if you're present." The boy looked up. For a moment Beckett thought the humor had missed. Then Owen said, "Good to know." Mara hid the beginning of a smile. Beckett regretted making the joke immediately, not because it was bad, because he had not intended to make one. Elias unfortunately saw everything. He walked past Beckett and murmured, "Careful. You're becoming approachable. Go supervise something." "I am." The morning program began with basic trail safety. Owen listened from the edge of the group. He answered no questions, volunteered for nothing. But whenever Flint moved, Owen's attention followed. Beckett noticed the pattern by the second hour. When Beckett filled the collapsible water bowl, Owen was there. When Flint needed brushing after pushing through burdock, Owen silently took the brush from the supply box. When Beckett removed the harness to check for rubbing beneath the straps, Owen stood nearby holding it without being asked. "You know how to put that on?" Beckett asked. Owen examined the harness. "No." "Good." The boy frowned. "Good? Means I don't have to unteach you anything." Owen's mouth moved slightly. Beckett showed him the chest strap, the side clips, the handle, and the places where a poorly fitted strap could irritate skin during long work. Owen listened closely. More closely than he had listened to any adult lecture that morning. Flint waited with the patience of an animal accustomed to humans discussing equipment around him. When Owen tried fastening the harness, he hesitated at one buckle. Beckett pointed. "Under, not over." Owen corrected it. Flint looked from one man to the other. "He always this patient?" Owen asked. "No." Owen glanced at the dog. "With me, with people who have food." "I don't have food." "Then congratulations. You're special." Owen rolled his eyes. It was the most 16-year-old thing Beckett had seen him do, and strangely, that felt like progress. Over the next several hours, Owen found reasons to remain near Flint without ever admitting that was what he was doing. He carried the water jug, held a long line, walked Flint between stations while Beckett moved equipment, sat beside him during lunch. Flint demanded nothing. That seemed to be the important part. Adults asked questions. "How are you doing? Do you want to talk? Are you sleeping? Have you thought about counseling?" Flint only existed beside him. If Owen said nothing, the silence stayed intact. Beckett understood why that might feel safer. He had once preferred dogs for exactly the same reason. After lunch, Elias opened an old metal storage locker beside the training shed. He was looking for flagging tape. Owen happened to be standing nearby. The locker door swung open. Inside hung several retired rescue jackets, old helmets, worn packs and equipment no longer used but not quite disposable. One faded orange shoulder patch caught the light. Owen went still. Beckett noticed before Elias did. The patch read, "Grant Mercer, Northwoods Rescue 14." Elias's hand stopped. For a second, no one moved. Then Owen stepped closer. That was his. Elias looked toward Mara, who stood across the clearing speaking with another volunteer. "Yes. Why is it here?" "We kept some of his gear." Owen stared at the jacket. Grant Mercer had been 45 when he died. Beckett knew only fragments of the man until then, but the old photographs pinned inside the rescue office showed someone easy to remember. Tall, broad through the chest without being heavy, sandy brown hair that had begun graying near the ears, a square face usually softened by a crooked smile, and a short beard that never seemed completely trimmed. Grant had been known for speaking to frightened hikers as if they were neighbors who had merely taken a wrong turn to the grocery store. He joked too much when weather got bad, made terrible coffee, and had a habit of carrying extra gloves because someone always forgot theirs. He had spent 12 years on the volunteer forest rescue team. 6 months ago, he had left home on an ordinary workday. His rescue vehicle had hit black ice on a narrow mountain road while responding to an injured snowmobiler. The truck slid through a guardrail. There had been no dramatic final rescue, no last radio speech, no meaningful goodbye, just an accident. Owen reached toward the jacket, stopped before touching it. Flint walked over. The dog had no history with Grant, no mysterious recognition. He only saw what Beckett saw now. The boy's breath had changed, his shoulders locked, his fingers curling toward his palms. Flint sat beside Owen, not against him, just close enough. Owen looked down, then back at the jacket. My mom got rid of his uniforms, Elias answered carefully. She probably had reasons. She got rid of everything. No, she didn't. Owen's jaw tightened. You don't know that. Elias did not argue. Beckett stepped away from the equipment table. He had seen grief become anger often enough to recognize the direction it was taking. Owen touched the edge of the rescue jacket at last. You know what everyone says? Nobody answered. Owen laughed once. There was no humor in it. They say he died doing what he loved. His eyes stayed on the patch. Like that makes it better. Flint lowered his head. Owen continued. They say he was a hero. His voice sharpened. They say he'd want me to be strong. Elias remained still. Beckett felt something old move inside his chest. A hospital corridor, a folded flag. Men saying at least it was quick. At least they died serving. At least they knew the risks. As if grief became lighter when surrounded by honorable vocabulary. Owen crouched beside Flint. If one more person tells me my dad was a hero, I think I'm going to scream. Beckett looked away, because he understood that sentence too well. Flint suddenly lifted his head toward Owen, then placed one paw lightly over the toe of the boy's boot. It was not a trained alert, not a rescue behavior, not something Beckett had ever taught him. Owen stared at the paw. For the first time since seeing Grant's jacket, the anger left his face. You don't care if he was a hero, do you? Flint blinked. Owen swallowed. You'd have liked him anyway. Something in Beckett tightened painfully, because perhaps that was what grief wanted after all the speeches were finished. Not for the dead to remain extraordinary, but simply to remain loved. Elias quietly closed the locker. No one mentioned the jacket again that afternoon. Owen stayed near Flint. The next exercise was a short scent problem, designed more for youth demonstration than serious training. A volunteer walked a winding route through the woods, crossing a shallow creek before hiding behind a stand of cedar. Beckett gave Flint the scent article. Find. Flint started cleanly. Owen watched from the marked observation route beside Elias. The dog worked at a steady pace, not slow, not poor, but Beckett knew his rhythm. Flint checked one scent pool twice where he once would have checked it once. He paused slightly after stepping over a fallen trunk. When the trail turned uphill, his pace shortened. He found the volunteer. Correctly. The teenagers applauded. Beckett rubbed the dog's neck. Then he reset the line. Elias approached. What are you doing? Again. He found him. He hesitated at the creek. So, he can do cleaner. Elias stared at him. It's a demonstration. Doesn't matter. It matters to Flint. Beckett looked at the dog. Flint was panting lightly, ready, or appearing ready. He can do better. Elias lowered his voice. He's 9. Beckett's jaw tightened. He's Flint. The words came out before he considered them. Elias's expression changed. Not pity. That would have been easier to reject. Recognition. That doesn't make him younger. Beckett ignored him. Reset the track. Elias did not move. For several seconds, the two men stared at each other. Then Owen's voice came from behind them. He already found the guy. Beckett turned. Owen stood with his hands inside the pockets of his canvas jacket. Beckett said, training isn't about doing something once. No, but if he did it right, why make him prove it again? The question landed far too close to something Beckett did not want examined. It's how working dogs maintain standards. Owen shrugged. Okay. But the look on his face said he did not believe him. Beckett hated that. Not the disagreement. The fact that a 16-year-old could see something he was working hard not to. He shortened the second trail. Told himself that was compromise. Flint completed it. Later, when the group stopped for water, Owen sat beside the German Shepherd under a birch tree. Beckett stood near the rescue truck reviewing radio batteries. He could see them without intending to watch. Owen ran his hand slowly down Flint's back. Then over the rear leg, Flint shifted his weight. Owen did it again, gently. The dog moved pressure toward the opposite side. Owen looked over. He hurts here. Beckett's body tightened. No. Owen glanced down at Flint. He keeps leaning off this leg. He's fine. I'm not saying he can't walk. Then don't diagnose my dog. The words came sharper than necessary. Owen's face closed immediately. It was remarkable how quickly teenagers could rebuild a wall once someone reminded them why it existed. I wasn't. Good. Owen stood. Flint looked up at him. The boy walked away without another word. Beckett watched him cross the clearing. A sour feeling settled in his stomach. Elias walked past carrying a coil of rope. You want me to say it? No. Great. Elias kept walking. That evening, Flint stood in the doorway of Beckett's cabin bedroom. Beckett was sitting on the edge of the bed removing his boots. The German shepherd remained there, watching. What? Flint's ears shifted. Beckett looked at him. You taking his side now? Flint walked away. Beckett exhaled. The cabin became very quiet. He replayed the exchange beneath the birch tree, not the words themselves. Owen's face afterward. Beckett had seen that expression in men under his command. The moment someone realized the anger aimed at them belonged somewhere else. The difference was that Owen was 16, and Beckett knew exactly where the anger belonged. He simply did not want to look at it. The following afternoon, Beckett drove to the training grounds even though no formal session was scheduled. Owen was there helping Elias reorganize emergency blankets in the equipment shed. Mara was working a hospital shift. Owen looked surprised when Beckett entered. Beckett leaned against the doorframe. I owe you an apology. Owen returned an emergency blanket to a shelf. For what? You know what? That narrows it down. Beckett almost smiled. Almost. You were watching Flint. Owen said nothing, and I got angry. Yeah, you didn't deserve it. Owen looked at him. So I was right? About my temper, not Flint? Beckett paused. The boy waited. Beckett had negotiated with armed men using less caution. Flint has some stiffness. Owen nodded slowly. That means I was right. That means you notice things. Same difference. No, Owen studied him for several seconds. Then something softened. Okay, Beckett turned to leave. Mr. Hale? He stopped. Owen almost never called him anything. Yeah? You said you'd lost people. Beckett remained facing the doorway. Yes. Did you get over it? Beckett turned back. The question was not casual. Owen had stopped working. Beckett considered giving him the type of answer adults gave young people because it sounded safe. Time helps. It gets easier. You learn to move forward. All true, none useful. Not like that, Beckett said. Owen frowned. Then how? You learn where to put it. Put what? The part that doesn't go away. Owen looked down at the blanket in his hands. Then why does everyone keep telling me I have to get over it? Beckett had no answer. So he did something that did not come naturally. He stayed quiet. Owen placed the blanket on the shelf. My dad and I had a fight. Beckett did not move before he died. The boy's voice change became flatter. The way people spoke when emotion felt dangerous. He told me to turn off my game and come eat dinner. A tiny bitter smile. Stupid. Beckett waited. I told him I wasn't hungry. He said Mom had made dinner. I said I didn't care. Owen's fingers tightened around the edge of the shelf. He took the controller, so I yelled at him. Beckett knew what was coming before the boy said it. I said I wish you'd just leave me alone. Silence. Then he went to work the next morning. Owen's eyes remained fixed on the wall. I was asleep. I didn't say goodbye. His voice broke slightly. He left. Beckett felt the shape of the boy's guilt before Owen put words around it. And he didn't come back. Owen swallowed hard, so everyone keeps saying it wasn't my fault, but they don't know. Beckett said quietly, know what? What I said. That sentence didn't put his truck on ice. Owen's face hardened. You don't know that. I do. You weren't there. No. Owen's eyes filled. Then stop telling me what it means, Beckett almost answered. Almost did what he had always done. Correct. Explain. Fix. Instead he stopped. Flint had wandered into the shed behind him. The dog crossed the concrete floor and lay down beside Owen. Nothing dramatic. No paw. No alert. Just his warm body against the boy's boot. Owen sat on the floor, then suddenly folded over Flint's neck and cried. Not loudly. That somehow made it worse. Beckett sat several feet away. He offered no speech, no story from Afghanistan, no comparison, no lesson. He just stayed. Minutes passed. Eventually, Owen wiped his face against his sleeve. That was embarrassing. Beckett looked toward Flint. He's seen worse. Owen gave a wet laugh. He tells you? Constantly. The boy breathed out. Beckett remained seated. For the first time in years, he understood that staying beside someone could be an action, maybe even a difficult one. Elias entered 20 minutes later. He took in the scene, said nothing about Owen's red eyes. Instead, he handed Owen a box of radio batteries. Put these on the second shelf. Owen stood. Okay. Elias waited until the boy had gone into the next room. Then he gave Beckett a folded printout. What's this? Something that came through the regional network. Beckett opened it. A K-9 search unit serving several counties was expanding its training program. They wanted an experienced former military handler to assist with a young German shepherd being evaluated for long-term search work. Beckett read the page twice. They asked for me? I recommended you. Beckett's eyes narrowed. You might have asked first. You would have said no. That should tell you something. It does. Beckett continued reading, then reached the final section. His expression changed. The unit was willing to place the young dog under Beckett's training supervision, but they required active field handlers to maintain only one primary operational K9. If Beckett accepted the role, Flint would have to be formally removed from active field search status. Retired, Beckett looked up. Elias said nothing. Across the shed, Flint lay beside Owen while the teenagers sorted batteries into careful rows. The dog looked content. Useful, Beckett thought. Still useful. The phrase came so quickly he almost did not hear what it revealed. He folded the paper once, very carefully, then again, and for the first time, the possibility of Flint's retirement was no longer an abstract future waiting somewhere far down the road. It had become a choice, one that would eventually require Beckett to decide whether love meant holding on, or knowing when to let a good soldier stop proving himself. The regional K9 training field sat 12 miles north of town, where an old county airstrip ended and second-growth pine began. By 8 in the morning, frost still silvered the grass in the shadows, though the sky above northern Wisconsin had cleared into a hard autumn blue. Orange survey flags marked scent lanes through the field. A row of training boxes stood near an equipment trailer, and beyond them a narrow trail disappeared between jack pines toward a marshy strip of alder. Beckett Rowan Hale parked his truck at the far end of the gravel lot. He sat behind the wheel longer than necessary. Flint was not with him. That felt wrong in a way Beckett had not expected. For years, arriving at a K9 field without the black and tan German Shepherd beside him would have been like arriving without boots. He finally stepped out. The old red and black flannel shirt, beneath his weathered field posture, looked almost too ordinary against the organized training setup. Its collar and cuffs were frayed from years of use. A light gray t-shirt showed at the throat. His faded dark jeans tucked loosely over scratched brown work boots, and the old military watch on his wrist seemed to catch the sunlight every time he checked the time without meaning to. A woman waited beside the equipment trailer. Her name was Tessa Rowe, the regional K9 coordinator. She was 46, about 5'7", lean in the shoulders and hips, with the wiry build of someone accustomed to long days moving through brush. Her fair skin had picked up years of sun across the nose and cheekbones, and her straight ash-brown hair was pulled into a low braid beneath a dark baseball cap. Gray-blue eyes gave her face a directness that bordered on severe until she smiled, which she did rarely but genuinely. Tessa had spent 17 years handling wilderness search dogs and had lost her first K9 to cancer shortly after retirement. Since then, she had become almost militant about one principle. Dogs were partners, not disposable equipment. She wore a dark forest green training jacket, black field pants, and mud-marked hiking boots. "You came," she said. Beckett shut the truck door. "You sound surprised. Elias said you might decide I was wasting your time. Elias talks too much." "That's not the Elias I know." Beckett looked toward the field. "Where's the dog?" Tessa's mouth moved slightly. "So we're skipping small talk. I was hoping." She gave a short whistle. A young German Shepherd came around the side of the trailer like someone had released a spring. Ranger was 2 years old. He was sable rather than black and tan, his coat a layered mixture of charcoal, tan, and dark brown, short and dense over a tall, athletic frame. His chest was narrower than Flint's, legs slightly longer in proportion, and his movements had the loose efficiency of a young dog whose body had not yet learned fatigue. His ears stood sharply upright. Amber brown eyes flashed from Tessa to Beckett to a tug toy lying on a crate and back again. A simple coyote brown working harness fit his torso. Ranger stopped at Tessa's left side for approximately 3 seconds. Then his entire body seemed to vibrate with the effort of remaining still. Beckett watched. High drive, that's the polite term. He mouthy? Less than he was 6 months ago. Environmental? Very little. Metal surfaces bothered him when he was younger. We worked through it. Gunfire? Neutral? Wildlife? Interested? Not committed. Beckett crouched slightly without reaching toward the dog. Ranger leaned forward to smell him. 1 sniff, 2. Then the young shepherd looked at Beckett's hands as if expecting them to produce work. Beckett felt something move low in his chest. He knew that look. Flint had looked at the world that way once. Not old Flint, young Flint. The Flint who had believed every closed door existed specifically so someone could teach him how to open it. The Flint who had run until his pads bled if Beckett had been careless enough to let him. The Flint who had needed to learn that enthusiasm and judgment were not the same thing. Tessa handed Beckett a scent article. Want to see him work? Beckett straightened. That's why I'm here. Ranger's first problem was deliberately simple. A volunteer had walked a quarter-mile trail through open grass, crossed the access road, then entered the timber where scent conditions changed abruptly. Beckett watched Ranger take the article. The dog inhaled, head lowered, then launched. Too fast. Beckett said nothing. Tessa allowed the line to feed. Ranger overran the first turn by almost 12 feet, corrected hard, doubled back and found it. Beckett's eyes narrowed. At the road crossings, Ranger checked vehicle contamination, lifted his head, circled once and reacquired better. Inside the timber, his pace changed. His nose dropped, his body settled. The frantic youthfulness became concentration. He found the volunteer behind a deadfall in just under 7 minutes. Tessa rewarded him with a tug. Ranger attacked the toy with joyful violence. He's good, Beckett said. Tessa looked at him. That sounded painful. He's young. That usually happens before old. Beckett ignored the remark. He needs patience at transitions. He trusts momentum too much. Agreed, he's reading scent, but he wants the answer before he's solved the problem. Tessa nodded. That's why we want someone with experience. Beckett looked toward Ranger. The dog was now carrying the tug toy in a circle. He doesn't need me. Every good young dog needs someone, not necessarily me. Tessa let the silence sit. Then she said, this isn't about replacing anybody. Beckett's eyes shifted toward her. I didn't say it was. No. You just looked at a 2-year-old shepherd like he stole your truck. For the first time that morning, Beckett almost laughed. Almost. They worked Ranger for another hour. Beckett gave small corrections to Tessa's training plan. Shorter starts, more patience at odor pools, less repetition when the dog solved correctly. The irony did not occur to him until much later. At noon, he drove back to the county training ground. Flint was there with Elias. The older German shepherd stood when Beckett stepped from the truck. His black and tan coat caught the sunlight, silvering faintly around the muzzle. Beckett felt a relief so immediate he disliked himself for it. Flint walked over, smelled Beckett's jeans, then his boots, then the front of his flannel shirt. Ranger's scent was everywhere. Flint's ears shifted. He sniffed again. Beckett watched closely. No jealousy, no wounded pride, no dramatic reaction. Just information. Another dog, young, male, working, interesting. Then Flint walked to the water bowl. Elias stood near the equipment shed, arms folded. How was it? Dog's fast. Good potential. That sounds like good. It means potential. Elias looked toward Flint. You bring him over? Who, the young dog? Beckett frowned. Why? To let them meet. They're dogs, not business partners. Elias shrugged. Fine. Tessa arrived 20 minutes later with Ranger. The moment Ranger saw Flint, the young shepherd's attention sharpened. He approached in a loose arc under control, body curious rather than confrontational. Flint stood still. They sniffed. Ranger bounced backward, then forward, a play invitation. Flint considered him. Ranger bounced again. For perhaps 3 minutes, Flint tolerated the younger dog's enthusiasm. They circled. Ranger attempted to initiate a chase. Flint obliged briefly, accelerating across the grass in a flash of old power that made Beckett's heart lift. Then Flint stopped. Not because Ranger did. Ranger was ready for another lap. Flint walked to the shade beneath a maple and lay down. Ranger stood several yards away, confused for half a second, then found a stick. Life continued. Beckett stared at Flint. The contrast was cruel in its simplicity. Ranger was not better. He was simply younger, and youth had no obligation to apologize. Ranger carried the stick toward Beckett, dropped it at his boots, and stared up expectantly. Before Beckett could react, Flint lifted his head from beneath the maple. For one strange second, Beckett expected the older dog to rise, to reclaim the game, the handler, the familiar role. Flint did not. He simply watched Ranger, then looked at Beckett, calm, untroubled, as if there were nothing to defend. Beckett felt something inside him twist, because Flint seemed completely unafraid of being replaced, which meant the fear belonged entirely to Beckett. He told Elias he needed more time. That was true. It was also convenient. Over the next 2 weeks, Beckett adjusted Flint's schedule. At least, that was what he called it. He shortened the formal tracks, reduced jumping, added swimming twice a week, allowed longer recovery between exercises. But he also began testing things he had never tested before: how quickly Flint rose after rest, how long he held pace uphill, whether he favored the rear leg after a cold morning, whether he could still solve cross-tracks as efficiently as last year. Beckett told himself he was monitoring condition. Owen saw something else. By then, the 16-year-old had become a regular presence around the kennel and equipment shed. He still kept to himself around most adults, but he had begun learning practical tasks: how to prepare scent articles without contamination, how to mark a trail, how to coil a long line without turning it into a knot, how to check paw pads, how to clean and store radio headsets. Beckett discovered the boy was good with instructions when they had an obvious purpose. One afternoon, Owen watched Beckett time Flint through a short scent drill. Flint finished cleanly. Beckett checked his watch. Again. Owen looked up from the water container. Why? Because I said so. That's not really an answer. Beckett glanced at him. Careful. Owen had learned enough by then not to retreat immediately. Why do you keep checking him? To make sure he's okay. Owen studied Beckett's face. Or to make sure you're okay. The question irritated him. But not because it was disrespectful. Because it echoed things other people had already tried to say. Beckett looked toward Flint. The dog was waiting. Ready because Beckett had asked him to be. Set the marker, Beckett said. Owen sighed, but he did it. 3 days later, the county dispatch called shortly after 4 in the afternoon. A 69-year-old hiker named Walter Hensley had failed to return from a marked loop near Willow Ridge. Walter was a retired high school history teacher, a thin, white-haired widower with wire-frame glasses, and a lifelong habit of taking solitary walks farther than his knees probably approved of. According to his daughter, he was mentally sharp, but had recently started using a cane on steep terrain. He had left home with water, a jacket, and no overnight gear. The situation was concerning, not yet critical. Temperature was expected to remain above freezing. No storms, no known medical emergency. Beckett volunteered. So did Flint. The search area consisted of mixed pine, hardwood ridges, and a web of old logging spurs. Elias assigned Beckett a scent article from Walter's truck. Flint took odor and started. For the first 20 minutes, everything felt familiar. The line moved through Beckett's glove. Flint worked intersections, ignored deer scat, checked a side trail, committed north. Beckett followed. His body settled into the rhythm he trusted more than almost anything else. Dog, ground, wind, terrain. No room for thoughts that did not matter. An hour later, Flint found the first strong confirmation. A fresh cane mark in mud beside a shallow drainage. Another half-mile. Then a scrap of blue fabric snagged on blackberry thorns. Walter's jacket color. They continued. The sun dropped lower. Flint slowed on an uphill grade. Beckett noticed, waited. The dog recovered at the top, kept working. 20 minutes later, Flint turned sharply toward a cluster of boulders. Walter Hensley sat between 2 rocks beneath a cedar, one pant leg muddy to the knee. His cane lay nearby. He raised one hand weakly when he saw them. Well, he called. I was beginning to think I'd have to teach a class out here. Beckett crouched. You hurt. Pride. Anything useful. My ankle. Walter had slipped on wet leaves and twisted it badly enough that walking became difficult. Rather than risk a worse fall, he had stayed put. Beckett radioed the coordinates. Flint stood beside Walter, panting. The older man scratched behind his ear. You find me? Beckett nodded. Walter looked into Flint's face. Good dog. Something inside Beckett loosened. There. Proof. Not theory. Not fear. Not a veterinarian talking about age. Flint had worked more than 2 miles of mixed terrain and found the subject. He could still do it. He was still Flint. The rescue team carried Walter out before dark. Back at the staging area, Elias handed Beckett a bottle of water. Good work, Beckett drank. Flint was solid. He was. No problem with distance. Elias's expression remained neutral. I didn't say there was. Beckett looked at him, just saying, I know what you're saying. Beckett turned away before Elias could say anything else. At home, Flint walked inside and went directly to his bed. Beckett poured food. Normally, the sound of kibble hitting the steel bowl brought Flint immediately. Nothing. Beckett looked toward the living room. Flint remained lying down. You hungry? The dog's eyes opened, closed again. Beckett waited. 10 minutes. 20. He moved the bowl closer. Flint eventually ate half, then stopped. At midnight, Beckett found him in the same position. In the morning, Flint tried to stand. His front legs came up. The rear followed slowly, very slowly. Beckett felt fear arrive like cold water. Easy. Flint took several stiff steps. The movement improved once he was walking. But Beckett had already seen enough. An hour later, they were at June Bell's clinic. June examined Flint in silence. Beckett stood near the table with both hands on his hips. Finally, he said, Well, overworked. That's it? That's enough. No tear, no ligaments, stable. Hips? Same as before. Beckett exhaled. June did not let him enjoy it. You look relieved. He's not injured. Correct. So we're okay? No. Beckett's eyes narrowed. June folded her arms. Tell me what you're waiting for. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. She pointed toward Flint. A torn ligament? Beckett said nothing. A bad fall? Silence. Do you need him to come back from a search unable to walk before you'll believe he's telling you he's tired? He found the subject. June's expression hardened. That is not an answer. He worked well. I believe you. He did exactly what he was trained to do, and now he's paying for it. Beckett looked toward Flint. The dog had lowered his head onto his paws. June's voice softened slightly. "Beckett, are you waiting for him to get hurt badly enough that the decision gets made for you?" The question landed harder than anger would have. Beckett turned away. For several moments, the only sound was an old wall clock. Then Beckett said quietly, "Flint saved me." June did not interrupt, not once. His gaze remained on the window. "After I got out, I didn't sleep." The admission felt strangely physical. "I'd stay awake until 4 or 5 in the morning. Didn't want people around. Didn't know what civilians did all day except complain about traffic." June waited. Flint needed breakfast at 6. The corner of Beckett's mouth moved without humor. "So I got up. He needed to walk. So I went outside. He needed training. So I had somewhere to go. He needed food. So eventually I remembered I probably did too." Beckett rubbed a hand across his jaw. "For months, that was it. No mission, no team, no reason I could explain. Just that dog needing the same things every day." June looked at Flint, then back at Beckett. "You're confusing two things." Beckett knew what she meant. He still asked, "What?" "Flint retiring from field work." She paused. "And Flint leaving you." Beckett's throat tightened. "They're not the same." He looked down at the gray beginning around Flint's muzzle. "Not yet." June heard the word. Her face changed. All the sharp humor disappeared. She did not tell him not to think like that. She did not promise Flint had years. Working with animals had taught her not to insult grief with guarantees. Instead, she said, "No, not yet." Beckett sat down. June continued gently, "You cannot stop the second thing by refusing the first." He closed his eyes for a moment. That was the sentence he carried home. In the weeks that followed, something else began changing almost without Beckett noticing. Owen became useful. Not useful in the way Beckett once measured people. Not mission essential. Just involved. Beckett taught him how wind affected scent, how to read topographic lines, how to identify heat stress, how to use a radio without flooding the channel with unnecessary words. Owen learned quickly. He also asked difficult questions at inconvenient times. What if the scent trail splits? You determine contamination. What if you're wrong? You correct. What if you don't know you're wrong? Beckett looked at him. Then hopefully someone around you does. Owen smiled. That seems relevant. Keep marking the trail. One afternoon, Beckett found Owen teaching a younger volunteer how to coil a long line exactly the way Beckett had shown him. Flint lay nearby asleep. For several minutes, Beckett watched. Something unfamiliar moved through him. He had spent years thinking his connection to search and rescue existed because of Flint. Yet here was a 16-year-old applying something Beckett had taught, a skill moving forward without needing 4 paws attached to it. He did not dwell on the idea. He was not ready. Late one evening, back at the cabin, rain tapped softly against the windows. Flint slept beside the wood stove. Beckett sat at the kitchen table. A retirement form lay in front of him. He filled in Flint's identification number, handler information, service history, medical recommendation, transition date. His handwriting stayed neat, controlled. At the bottom was one final signature line. Beckett uncapped the pen, held it over the paper. Flint shifted in his sleep, a quiet sigh. Beckett looked at him. Then at the signature line, the pen touched the paper, stopped. He set it down, unsigned. The following morning, Elias sent the team schedule. A large multi-agency search and rescue exercise had been approved for the northern forest sector. K-9 teams, ground units, medical crews, youth observers. Several miles of staged scent problems. Beckett read the notice twice. Flint was not assigned. Nobody had asked for him. Beckett opened the registration page, entered his own name, then Flint's. He clicked submit. Across the cabin, Flint slept beneath the window, unaware that Beckett had just bought himself one more chance to pretend the ending had not already begun. By 7:30, the northern Wisconsin forest had already filled with vehicles. County rescue trucks lined one side of the gravel access road. A volunteer fire engine sat beneath a stand of red maples, its polished metal catching flashes of pale autumn sun. Portable medical tables had been unfolded near the command tent, radios crackled between teams, and colored flags marked simulated search sectors through several miles of pine, birch, cedar, and low marshland. It was only an exercise. Everyone knew that, yet the organization around it carried the seriousness of something real. That was the point. Beckett, Rowe, and Hale stood beside Flint near the K-9 staging area, watching people move through their assignments. At 43, the former Navy SEAL still looked more comfortable at the edge of a mission than at the center of a conversation. His 6'1" frame was broad through the shoulders, and hard from decades of practical training rather than vanity. A short dark beard shadowed his angular jaw. Blue-gray eyes swept across routes, equipment, weather, people. His dark brown hair remained clipped military short, with premature silver showing at both temples. He wore his usual old red and black flannel shirt over a light gray t-shirt, faded dark blue jeans, worn brown work boots, and the old military watch on his left wrist. Flint waited beside him in a black working harness. The 9-year-old German shepherd still carried himself with the composed confidence of an experienced K9. His short black and tan coat was dense and healthy, his chest deep, his working muscles still defined. Only the silver beginning around his muzzle and the occasional extra second required after standing betrayed his age. This morning he looked alert, almost young. Beckett noticed that too. He chose to make more of it than he should have. Across the field, Owen Mercer carried 2 cases of handheld radios toward the logistics table. The 16-year-old had become noticeably more comfortable around the rescue team over the past few weeks. He was still thin, still guarded, still wearing his charcoal hoodie beneath the familiar light brown canvas jacket with dark jeans and hiking boots. Chestnut hair fell untidily over his forehead, but there was less emptiness in his green-gray eyes. He had a task. Task helped. Beckett knew that better than anyone. Mara walked beside him for part of the way, carrying a clipboard she did not need. She wore her navy quilted jacket over a cream sweater, her dark brown shoulder-length hair tied low behind her neck. At 41, she had the compact, capable build of a hospital nurse accustomed to long shifts and carrying responsibility without complaint. But today the strain around her hazel eyes was sharper. She stopped Owen near the logistics table. "You stay inside the marked areas. I know. You do not leave with the ground team unless Elias specifically assigns you. I know. And if weather changes." "Mom." Mara stopped. Owen looked at her. "I know." Her mouth tightened. The rescue environment still carried Grant everywhere for her. Radios, orange jackets, vehicle doors slamming, men checking ropes, all ordinary things that had once belonged to her husband's life before one icy road made them part of his death. "I can take you home," she said quietly. Owen shook his head. "I don't want to be scared of something Dad loved his whole life." Mara's face shifted. There was pride there, and pain. The two had become almost indistinguishable. She nodded once. "Stay where Elias can see you." "I will." Beckett looked away before either of them noticed him watching. Elias Ward approached carrying a laminated exercise map. The 58-year-old former smoke jumper wore his dark red rescue jacket, charcoal Henley, and field cargo pants. His long, weathered face looked as if years of wind and wildfire had carved permanent patience into it, though Beckett knew there were limits. "Flint's demonstration sector is blue too," Elias said. Beckett took the map. "Distance, half-mile, maybe a little less. That's all? It's a demonstration." Beckett's eyes moved over the larger trail network beyond Blue 2. "What's the full problem?" Elias looked at him. "Not Flint's." I asked a question. "1.25 miles, mixed terrain, creek crossing, 2 contamination points. Reasonable for the assigned team." Beckett folded the map. Elias watched him a second longer. "Half-mile, Beck. I heard you. That isn't the same thing as agreeing." Beckett slid the map into his back pocket. "Relax. I always get nervous when you tell me that." The morning briefing began. Several K9 teams had come from neighboring counties, including Tessa Rowe's regional unit. Ranger, the 2-year-old sable German shepherd Beckett had evaluated earlier, waited beside a younger handler near the edge of the field, his coyote brown harness standing out against his dark sable coat. Ranger practically vibrated with anticipation. Flint noticed him, watched briefly, then returned his attention to Beckett. No drama, no competition. The absence of it bothered Beckett more than rivalry would have. The exercise scenario involved a hiker who had supposedly fallen from a trail after becoming disoriented. Teams would rotate through scent problems, communications drills, and medical extractions while youth observers helped at staging areas. Elias had planned Flint's part carefully. Short, controlled, useful. Beckett had another idea. He told himself he only wanted one clean run, a final full trail, something to remember Flint by when the day eventually came. But beneath that thought lived another one. If Flint completed the longer route cleanly, maybe everyone had been too cautious. June, Elias, Tessa, even Owen. Maybe age had become a story people were telling because they had noticed a gray muzzle and wanted an ending. Beckett wanted evidence. And evidence, unlike emotion, could be measured. When Flint's turn came, Beckett knelt beside him. The scent article was a cotton cap sealed in a paper bag. "Ready?" Flint stared forward. Beckett opened the bag. "Find." Flint took scent, then moved. The first section ran through sparse birch. Flint worked beautifully. No hesitation, no wasted circling. Beckett followed 10 feet behind, line running smoothly through his gloved hand. Owen watched from the marked observer route with 2 other teenagers. Elias stood farther back near a radio checkpoint. Flint reached the end of Blue 2. The volunteer assigned as the demonstration subject was hidden approximately 40 yards ahead near a cluster of pines. Beckett knew where the official track ended. He also knew a training coordinator had laid a longer continuation from the same scent source earlier that morning for another team. Flint crossed the first target area. Beckett did not stop him. One of the assistants lifted a hand. "Beckett, subject's back there." "I know." He let Flint continue. The dog moved deeper into the forest. Elias's voice came through the radio. "Hale." Beckett ignored it for 3 seconds. "Hale, confirm you're extending Blue 2. Beckett keyed his radio. "Dog's committed. That wasn't the assignment. He's working." A pause. Then Elias said, "Bring him back." Beckett looked at Flint. The German Shepherd was strong on scent. "Give me 5 minutes. Beckett lowered the radio volume. He hated himself a little for doing it. "Not enough to stop," Flint continued. Down a slope, across a narrow wooden footbridge, through a patch of wet alder. His movement stayed controlled. Beckett felt his confidence building with every 100 yards. Look at him. Still there. Still sharp. Still working. The longer trail curved toward the equipment access road. Flint slowed. Beckett waited for the dog to sort scent. Instead, Flint lifted his head, turned left. The target trail continued straight. "Flint." The dog moved left. Beckett checked the line. No. Flint pulled harder. "Track." Nothing. Flint left the established route. Beckett's stomach tightened. A K9 team farther back stopped to watch. Flint moved toward a row of parked support vehicles. Not toward the woods, not toward the target. Beckett shortened the lead. "Flint, track." The dog looked back, then pulled again. A familiar heat rose through Beckett's chest. Not merely frustration, embarrassment. He had deliberately extended the exercise to prove Flint could still do it. And now, in front of Elias, Tessa, and half the regional team, the dog was abandoning the scent. Flint. Sharper. The German Shepherd ignored him. Beckett felt the eyes on them. For one ugly second, he wondered whether this was what decline looked like. Not stiffness. Not a slower recovery. Confusion. A working mind beginning to fail before the body did. The thought terrified him, which made his next command harsher. "Heel." Flint stopped, looked directly at Beckett, and refused. Then a sound carried from behind one of the medical support trucks. Small, ragged, almost lost beneath radio chatter. A breath, then another. Flint turned toward it. Beckett heard it too. Everything inside him changed. "Go." Flint rounded the rear of the truck. A young woman sat on the ground between the vehicle and a stack of folded canopy frames. She was perhaps 22, thin, around 5'5", with fair freckled skin and light auburn hair pulled into a messy ponytail. She wore a gray volunteer medic sweatshirt, black utility pants, and trail shoes. Her name badge read Lesh Parker. Leah was a nursing student from Green Bay who volunteered at outdoor events because her older brother had once been rescued after a climbing accident. Usually energetic and quick to laugh, she now looked frighteningly small. One hand clutched her throat. Her face had flushed red. Her lips were beginning to swell. A crushed paper cup lay beside her. Beckett dropped beside her. "Leah, can you talk?" she tried. Only a strained whisper came out. "Stung." "Where?" She pointed weakly toward her neck. A wasp lay dead near the collar of her sweatshirt. Her breathing was high and tight. Anaphylaxis. "Medic," Beckett shouted. Flint stayed beside Leah but did not crowd her. The dog's head remained low, focused. Leah's hand found the side of his harness, just as Owen's once had. Beckett looked at the gesture, then at Flint. The dog had not lost the trail because he was confused. He had left a stage problem for a real one, again. For several seconds, the entire exercise seemed to vanish. No colored flags, no scores, no demonstration. Only a young woman struggling for air, one old working dog beside her, and a handler who had been so desperate to prove the dog could still follow orders that he had nearly mistaken judgment for failure. Flint looked at Beckett, calm, steady, not asking permission, and Beckett understood something that frightened him more than age ever had. Flint's body might be slowing, his judgment was not. The dog had not become less capable of knowing what mattered. He had simply become less interested in pretending a drill was more important than a life. 2 medics arrived at a run. One carried an emergency kit. Leah had her own epinephrine auto-injector buried in her backpack, but she had not been able to reach it after her breathing worsened. Treatment began immediately. Oxygen, monitoring, epinephrine. A second responder called for transport as a precaution. Within minutes, Leah's breathing began to ease. Color slowly returned toward normal. Flint remained nearby until Beckett finally touched his shoulder. "Come on," the dog followed, this time without hesitation. People gathered around them afterward. Praise came quickly. "Hell of a dog. Good catch." He heard her from halfway across the lot. Tessa crouched beside Flint and rubbed his chest. "You still know how to embarrass the humans, huh?" Flint panted. Beckett stood a few feet away. He should have felt proud he did. But pride had become tangled with something heavier. Flint had made the right decision, yet Beckett had initially punished him for it, because the decision had interfered with what Beckett needed the morning to prove. Owen approached from the logistics area. He looked from Flint to the ambulance carrying Leah away. He did it again. Beckett nodded. Owen studied him. "You okay?" A week earlier, Beckett might have given the boy a look for asking. Today, he said, "Not sure." Owen accepted that. Elias did not. He waited until the formal exercise resumed and most people returned to their stations. Then he walked Beckett away from the group. What the hell was that? Beckett knew better than to pretend ignorance. He was working. He was assigned half a mile. He was good. That isn't the point. He found a real medical emergency. Elias stepped closer, and thank God he did. Then what are we arguing about? The mile before that. Beckett's jaw hardened. He handled it. You deliberately extended him. I assessed him. No. Elias's pale eyes sharpened. You used him. The word landed like an insult. Beckett took one step forward. Watch yourself. I am watching. Elias pointed toward the staging area where Flint was drinking. That dog trusts you. I know. Do you? Beckett said nothing. Elias continued. He trusts you to decide when the hill is too steep, when the day is too hot, when the track is too long, when the cost of doing what you ask is higher than he understands. He understands plenty. Not this. Elias's voice stayed controlled, which somehow made it worse. He doesn't understand that you're terrified of who you are when he stops working. Beckett's face went cold. Don't analyze me. Then listen to the operational version. Elias stepped closer. Flint trusts you to know when to stop. He has no retirement plan, no ego about field status, no idea what a career is. That part belongs to you. Beckett looked away. Elias's voice dropped. Don't make him pay for the fact that you don't know how to end something. For a moment, Beckett wanted to say something cruel, something accurate enough to hurt. It was an old skill. He did not use it. He walked away instead. Flint came with him. By noon, Beckett had left the exercise entirely. He did not say goodbye to Tessa, did not discuss Ranger, did not sign anything. He drove home with the truck windows cracked and the radio off. For the next 3 days, he avoided the training grounds. Elias called once. Beckett did not answer. Tessa sent a short message asking whether Flint was all right. He replied, fine. June called after hearing about the extended track. He let that one go to voicemail too. At the cabin, time narrowed. Feed Flint, walk, coffee, split wood, repair a loose hinge on the shed, read half a page of a book and realized he had retained none of it. Flint seemed perfectly content. That was almost insulting. The dog slept in patches of sunlight, carried an old tennis ball from room to room, barked once at a chipmunk beneath the porch. No visible existential crisis, no sadness about leaving an exercise early, no concern about titles, qualifications, or active status. Beckett began to suspect June had been right in the most aggravating possible way. On the 4th afternoon, bicycle tires crunched over his driveway. Beckett was repairing the handle of an axe when Owen appeared. The teenager braked near the porch. His brown canvas jacket was unzipped over the charcoal hoodie, and his chestnut hair had been blown in every direction during the ride. Beckett looked at the bike. You know roads are for trucks. Owen leaned it against the railing. Good thing I used one. What are you doing here? Visiting Flint. Flint didn't invite you. Owen looked toward the porch. The German Shepherd was asleep in a rectangle of afternoon sunlight. He looks devastated, barely holding together. Owen sat on the top step. Beckett returned to the axe handle. For several minutes they said nothing. The silence was no longer awkward between them. Owen watched Flint breathe. Finally he asked, is he done? Beckett's hand stopped on the sandpaper. No. Owen nodded. Another minute passed. If he never did another search, Beckett looked at him. Would you still love him? Beckett stared. That's a stupid question. Okay. Owen looked back at Flint. Then why do you think he has to keep doing searches? Beckett opened his mouth. Nothing useful came. Owen continued before courage disappeared. You keep acting like if he stops working, something bad happens to him. It's what he knows. Maybe. What's that supposed to mean? Owen shrugged. He seems pretty good at sleeping. Despite himself, Beckett almost smiled. Almost. Owen's face became serious again. Maybe he already did his job. The words were quiet. No accusation. No wisdom performance. Just a 16-year-old looking at an old dog. But they went through Beckett with surgical precision. He looked at Flint, 9 years old, black and tan coat warmed by sunlight, silver around the muzzle, scar on one ear, a body that had crossed more miles beside Beckett than most people would ever know. Flint had found people, protected people, worked through cold, heat, mud, fear, noise. And after the military, he had done something nobody had formally trained him to do. He had kept Beckett moving. Maybe Flint had already given enough. Maybe the only person asking for more was the one who could not tolerate what enough meant. Owen stood. I should go before Mom decides I've been murdered. Beckett nodded. Owen. The boy turned. Thanks. Owen looked faintly uncomfortable. For what? Beckett glanced toward Flint. Being annoying. Owen smiled. Anytime. That night, rain whispered over the cabin roof. Beckett sat at the kitchen table. The retirement paperwork was where he had left it. He pulled it closer. This time he did not reread Flint's service history, did not calculate age, did not invent another test. He signed the final line. The pen remained in his hand for several seconds afterward. Flint slept by the wood stove. Nothing changed. The ceiling did not fall. The dog did not disappear. Beckett folded the form. He planned to deliver it in the morning. At 5:17 a.m. his phone rang. Elias. Beckett stared at the screen before answering. What? No greeting came back. Only Elias's field voice. We have a missing child. Beckett sat upright. How old? 8. Where? Lost Lake Trail System. Family camping. Kid wandered off sometime before dawn. Beckett was already standing. What's the weather? Cold front moving faster than forecast. Rain turning to sleet by afternoon. Beckett looked toward Flint. The German shepherd had awakened. Watching, Elias continued. Nearest certified K9 team is over 2 hours out. Beckett's eyes moved to the signed retirement papers on the table. Outside, wind pressed rain against the dark windows. And for the first time, the decision he had finally made was about to be tested by something far more powerful than fear. Need. By the time Beckett, Rowe, and Hale reached Lost Lake, dawn had barely begun to separate the trees from the sky. The forest was still mostly black. Headlights swept across wet pine trunks, emergency vehicles, orange cones, and volunteers moving quickly between a canvas command tent and the trailhead. Rain had weakened to a cold mist, but the temperature had dropped 6 degrees in less than 2 hours. The wind coming across the lake had teeth in it now. Beckett parked at the edge of the staging area. Flint stood immediately in the back seat. The 9-year-old German shepherd recognized the sounds before Beckett opened the door. Radios, diesel engines, boots on gravel. Men and women speaking in clipped phrases. Search, work, routine. Flint's black and tan body came fully alert. His amber eyes sharpened. The small scar along one ear caught the beam of a passing flashlight, and the silver beginning around his muzzle seemed almost invisible in the darkness. Beckett sat motionless for several seconds. The signed retirement form was folded inside the inner pocket of his old red and black flannel shirt. Flint looked at him. Beckett looked back. You know what this is? Flint's ears moved forward. That's not the problem. Beckett got out. He wore the same faded dark blue jeans and worn brown work boots he trusted in the field, a light gray t-shirt beneath the old flannel, and the military watch on his wrist. His broad 6'1" frame still carried the disciplined readiness of his Navy SEAL years. But this morning his movements lacked certainty in one particular place. He did not reach for Flint's working line. Elias Ward appeared through the mist. The 58-year-old rescue leader looked as if he had already been awake half a day. His dark red SAR jacket was damp at the shoulders, his short gray beard silvered with moisture, and the lines around his pale blue eyes seemed deeper than usual. He stopped beside Beckett's truck. Family says the boy went missing sometime between 4 and 5. Name, Caleb Hart. Age, clothes green puffer coat, gray sweatpants, hiking shoes, no hat. Beckett looked toward the tree line. Medical, mild asthma. Mother says cold air can trigger it, but he usually carries an inhaler. Usually, they found it in the tent. Beckett's jaw tightened. Elias continued. Family was camping at Site 7. Kid woke up, maybe heard something, maybe went looking for the bathroom trail. Nobody knows. Tracks? Rain damaged most of them. K9, regional team is en route. How long? About 2 hours. Beckett looked at Flint. Elias followed his gaze, then said deliberately, I did not call you for Flint. Beckett's eyes returned to him. I know. I called because I need another experienced ground lead. I know. Elias waited. You can leave him here. That sentence was harder than it should have been. Flint shifted inside the truck. Ready. Expecting. Beckett could almost feel all the arguments forming in his own head. One search. A missing 8-year-old. Cold front moving in. Flint could still work. Flint had found Walter. Flint had detected Leah. What if 2 hours mattered? What if refusing to use him cost a child something permanent? Beckett pulled out his phone. Give me 5 minutes. He walked away from the staging area and called June Bell. The 67-year-old veterinarian answered on the 4th ring. If this is about a squirrel, I'm hanging up. It's me. A pause. I know, squirrels generally don't sound that grim. There's a missing child. June became serious immediately. Where? Lost Lake. Flint with you? Yes. Another pause. Beckett looked toward the truck. He could help. June said nothing. That's all you've got? You want me to make the decision? I want your medical opinion. You already have it. This is different. Why? Because this is real. June's reply came softly. So was his body yesterday. Beckett closed his eyes. Wind moved through the pine canopy. He heard radios behind him. June, all right. Her voice became clinical. If Flint belonged to another handler, same age, same arthritis, same recent overexertion, and you had read his medical file instead of loving him for 9 years. She paused. Would you put him on this search? Beckett said nothing. June waited. That was the answer. When he returned to the truck, Flint was standing against the door. Beckett opened it. The German Shepherd stepped down. For a moment, muscle memory nearly took over. Harness, lead, scent article, find. Instead, Beckett took Flint to the command tent. No field. Flint looked up. Beckett swallowed. You stay. The dog remained beside him. No protest. No confusion that Beckett could see. Only waiting. Elias came over. You sure? No, good enough. Beckett handed Flint's leash to a logistics volunteer he trusted. Then reconsidered. No. Elias raised an eyebrow. Beckett looked around the tent. I want him here where I can see him when teams cycle through. Fine. Owen Mercer arrived less than 20 minutes later with Mara. Beckett frowned the moment he saw them. The 16-year-old wore his charcoal hoodie beneath the familiar light brown canvas jacket, chestnut hair damp from the mist, green-gray eyes alert rather than sleepy. Mara, compact and composed in her navy quilted jacket and cream sweater, looked less pleased. He heard the scanner traffic, she said before Beckett could ask. Owen corrected her. Elias texted the youth logistics list. Mara gave him a look. That is not better. Owen turned to Beckett. No woods. I know. No field team. I know. No improvising. Owen looked offended. I've met you. Elias coughed into one fist to hide a laugh. Beckett pointed toward the command table. Battery inventory, trail maps, water. Stay where somebody can see you. Owen nodded. Mara caught Beckett's sleeve before he moved away. You're really letting him stay? He wants to help. That isn't what I asked. Beckett looked toward Owen. The boy was already organizing radios by charge level. He stays here. Mara glanced at the dark tree line. Her face tightened. I hate this place today. Beckett knew what she meant. Not Lost Lake specifically. The whole machinery of rescue. It had once carried her husband away and returned only grief. You can stay beside him. I know. She drew a breath. I'm trying not to make my fear his job. Beckett looked at her. That sentence sounded uncomfortably familiar. Yeah, he said. Me too. The missing boy's mother sat near the back of the command tent. Her name was Hannah Hart. She was 35, tall and slender, with fair skin gone almost colorless from fear, and strawberry blonde hair twisted into a loose knot that kept falling apart around her face. She wore a dark green rain shell over flannel pajama pants and borrowed hiking boots 2 sizes too large. Normally, according to her husband, Hannah taught 3rd grade in Eau Claire and was the sort of woman who remembered every child's birthday and carried extra snacks for other people's kids. Now her hands shook continuously around a paper cup of coffee she had not touched. She kept looking toward the entrance. Every time Boots approached, hope rose visibly into her face. Every time they belonged to someone without Caleb, it left again. Flint watched her. Beckett saw it. The dog did not pull toward her. He simply noticed. Beckett joined the first ground sweep at 6:42. They searched the immediate campground, then the bathroom path, then the shoreline. Nothing. The rain had blurred shallow prints into meaningless depressions. A small sneaker mark near the east trail might have belonged to Caleb, or another child yesterday. The team marked it anyway. By 8:30, the wind had shifted north. Cold pushed harder through the woods. Beckett led a 4-person ground team along an abandoned logging spur. They checked culverts, brush piles, low areas where a frightened child might shelter. He called Caleb's name until the sound began to feel useless. At one creek crossing, Beckett stopped, looked at wet stones, looked at the dark water. His mind supplied Flint immediately. The way the dog would cast along the bank, check odor, read direction. Beckett hated how badly he wanted that certainty. One of the volunteers asked, "You okay?" Yeah, he was not. They kept moving. At 9:18, Elias radioed. Regional K9 just arrived. Beckett stopped on the trail. Something inside him sank, then lifted. He could not decide which. By the time his team returned to staging, Tessa Rowe was clipping a long line onto Ranger's Coyote Brown working harness. The 2-year-old sable German Shepherd looked exactly as Beckett remembered him. Tall, lean, young enough that excitement seemed to travel directly from his lungs to his paws. his amber eyes fixed on the scent article Tessa held. Ranger had no gray on his muzzle, no stiffness, no history with Beckett. That should not have mattered. It did. Tessa looked up. Sector? Elias pointed to the map. East Ridge. We have possible direction of travel but no clean trail. She nodded. Ranger took scent and went. Beckett stood there watching another dog disappear into the woods to do the work Flint had done beside him for years. The pain was startling. Not jealousy, not resentment, grief with movement in it. He turned. Flint lay beneath the command table. His head rested on his paws, completely unconcerned. A sound came from behind Beckett. Not a radio, a broken breath. Hannah Hart had finally stopped holding herself together. She was sitting on a folding chair with both hands over her face, whispering the same sentence again and again. I should have heard him. I should have heard him. Mara moved toward her. Stopped. Perhaps she recognized the danger of telling a terrified mother what she should feel. Before anyone decided what to say, Flint stood. He walked across the tent. No harness command, no search cue. He simply stopped beside Hannah and lowered himself against her boots. Hannah uncovered her face. For a second, she only stared. Then one trembling hand settled onto Flint's silvering muzzle. Owen quietly sat on the ground several feet away. A boy who knew what it was to lose someone. A mother who did not yet know whether she had. And between them, a working dog who had not entered the forest that morning, yet was still doing something no map could measure. Beckett watched from the doorway. For the first time, retirement did not look like the absence of purpose. It looked like purpose changing shape. The search entered its 6th hour. Cold mist turned intermittently to sleet. Teams rotated. Medical staff prepared warming blankets. Mara stayed near Hannah. Owen logged radio times and passed fresh batteries to incoming teams. Flint remained close, sometimes sleeping, sometimes lifting his head whenever the tent changed mood. At 10:47, Ranger alerted. Tessa's voice snapped over the radio. Command, K91. Strong track east of Ridge 4. Moving northeast. Every person in the tent went still. Elias leaned over the map. Ground 2, redirect to K91. Beckett was already reaching for his pack. Elias looked at him. You're ground 2. Beckett nodded. He started toward the trail. For half a second, his eyes went to Flint. The dog remained beside Hannah. Beckett left without him. The terrain on Ridge 4 was ugly. Wet rock, downed timber. Young spruce growing close enough together to catch sleeves and packs. Beckett's team met Tessa and Ranger near a shallow drainage. Ranger circled once, then committed uphill. Tessa followed. Beckett stayed behind her. That was new. For years, the dog in front had been Flint. The handler had been Beckett. Now his job was different. Support, terrain, safety. Trust somebody else. Ranger crossed beneath a fallen pine, then stopped beside a patch of mud sheltered under the trunk. A print, small, fresh enough to retain tread detail. Child-size hiking shoe. Tessa pointed. There. Beckett's pulse changed. Direction. Ranger was already moving. Another print appeared 30 yards later. Then a broken fern, a scrape on wet bark. The boy had left the main trail and descended toward a low ravine. Beckett keyed his radio. Confirmed sign. Ground 2 moving northeast. Child trail likely. Hannah's voice did not come through the radio, but Beckett could imagine the command tent receiving the words. The terrain steepened. Ranger accelerated. Tessa called him back into control. Good handling. Beckett noticed. That mattered too. 100 yards farther, Ranger stopped beside a pile of wind-thrown trees. He began working the edge, then barked. Once. Again. Tessa dropped low. Caleb? A tiny voice answered from somewhere inside. Here. Beckett was moving before anyone else finished reacting. The boy had crawled beneath the root mass of a fallen spruce, probably trying to shelter from the rain. Another trunk had shifted during the night, partially blocking the opening. Beckett knelt. I'm Beckett. A pale face appeared between branches. Caleb Hart was 8 years old, small for his age, with straight dark blonde hair plastered across his forehead and a scattering of freckles over a round, frightened face. His green puffer coat was muddy and one sleeve had torn near the elbow. His gray sweatpants were soaked below the knee. His lips were pale, but he was conscious. Mom, she's waiting for you. I got lost. I know. I tried to go back. I know. Caleb started crying, not loudly, like he had been saving it. Beckett removed 2 branches, then tested the heavier trunk. Too unstable to yank blindly. Another rescuer stabilized it with webbing. Tessa held Ranger back. The ground team cleared the opening together. Together. That word mattered. When there was enough room, Beckett crawled inside. Caleb reached for him. Beckett wrapped the boy in a thermal blanket before lifting him. You got me? Caleb nodded against his shoulder. No. Beckett adjusted his grip. I've got you. The team moved carefully back toward the ridge. Ranger led them to safer footing. Tessa handled him. Another rescuer carried Beckett's pack. A medic met them halfway. No single hero, no dramatic lone rescue. A chain of people doing one part correctly. By the time Caleb entered the command area, Hannah was already outside. She ran past the marked line before anyone could stop her. Beckett lowered the boy. Caleb disappeared into his mother's arms. Hannah made a sound Beckett would remember for a long time. Half sob, half prayer. Mara turned away and wiped her eyes. Owen did not. He watched openly. Flint stood beside him. Caleb eventually noticed the old German shepherd. "That your dog?" he asked Beckett. Beckett looked at Flint. "Yeah, did he find me?" The question should have hurt. It did, but not in the way Beckett expected. "No." He nodded toward Ranger, who stood beside Tessa across the staging area. "That dog did." Caleb looked at Ranger. "He's good, very." Beckett meant it. When the excitement settled, Beckett walked toward Flint. The German shepherd stood as he approached, tail moving, not wildly, just enough. Beckett crouched. "You missed the whole thing." Flint pushed his muzzle beneath Beckett's hand. No accusation, no disappointment, no confusion over why another dog had done the search. Only recognition. Beckett had left, Beckett had returned. That seemed to be enough. Something inside him finally released. He pressed his forehead briefly against Flint's. "You really don't care, do you?" Flint sneezed against his beard. Beckett laughed. A real one. "Elias heard it, so he's cured you. Don't push it." The following morning, Beckett did not go to the rescue station. No officials, no ceremony, no retired Heller speeches. The cabin was quiet. Sunlight came through the kitchen window. Flint stood near the table while Beckett unclipped the black working harness. He held it for a moment. The material carried scratches, worn edges, a faint smell of woods and dog. Years. Beckett placed it on the table. Flint looked at it, then looked at Beckett. Beckett swallowed. "That's it." Flint stood there. "You're retired." "Nothing." "You could look a little emotional." Flint walked into the living room. Beckett stared after him. A second later, the German shepherd returned carrying an old yellow tennis ball. He dropped it at Beckett's boots. Beckett looked down, then up. Flint waited. June Bell's voice came back to him. "He becomes a dog." Beckett laughed until his eyes burned. "Yeah." He picked up the ball. "All right." He threw it gently across the room. Flint chased it, not like a K9, not like a soldier, just like a dog. For several weeks after Caleb Hart was found, life became quieter. Owen continued helping with the youth program. Beckett began spending more time teaching and less time handling. Flint slept more, walked without the harness. Nothing terrible happened. Beckett had begun, cautiously, to believe the hardest part was behind him. Then, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, his phone rang. Mara. He answered immediately. He heard her breathing before she spoke. "Beckett." Her voice was shaking. Something cold entered his stomach. "What happened?" "It's Owen." Beckett stood. "What about him? He left school." "When? They don't know." "Sometime after lunch." "Phone?" "On his desk." "Bike gone." Beckett looked toward Flint, sleeping beside the stove. Mara's voice broke. "No one knows where he went." Beckett closed his eyes. For months, Flint had been teaching him that not every lost person needed to be found by scent. Now the boy who had understood Flint before Beckett did was somewhere beyond the reach of a radio call. And this time Beckett would have to ask himself a different question. Not whether Flint could find Owen. Whether Beckett had listened closely enough to know where Owen would go. The first thing Beckett noticed when he reached the Mercer house was the bicycle-shaped absence beside the garage. A wet rectangle remained on the concrete where Owen usually left it. Everything else looked painfully ordinary. A recycling bin leaned against the siding. Maple leaves had collected in the gutter. A porch light glowed against the gray afternoon, even though there were still several hours before sunset. Inside, Mara Mercer stood at the kitchen counter with both hands braced against the edge as if the house had begun moving beneath her. She was still dressed for work. Navy quilted jacket over a cream sweater, dark jeans, brown leather boots. Her shoulder-length dark brown hair had partly escaped the low tie at the back of her neck. At 41, Mara normally carried herself with the practical steadiness of a hospital nurse accustomed to emergencies. Today that steadiness was gone. Her hazel brown eyes were red. "School security checked the cameras," she said the moment Beckett entered. "He left through the east bike rack at 1:26. No one followed. They don't think so." "Anyone see him talking to somebody?" "No." "Money?" "His wallet is gone." "Backpack?" "Gone." "Jacket?" "The brown one." "Anything else missing?" Mara looked toward the hallway. Then her face changed. Beckett noticed. "What?" She swallowed. "Grant's rescue jacket." Beckett went still. After Owen had found the old jacket in the rescue equipment locker weeks earlier, Elias had eventually offered it back to the family. Mara had brought it home, washed nothing, repaired nothing, and hung it in the hall closet exactly as it had been. She had never seen Owen wear it. Now it was gone. Beckett looked around the kitchen. Owen's phone lay on the table. No attempt to hide it, no goodbye message, no dramatic note. That mattered. Teenagers leaving in anger often wanted their absence noticed. Owen had left the device most capable of betraying where he went. What happened before school? Beckett asked. Mara's mouth tightened. We fought. About what? She turned away. For several seconds she rearranged objects that did not need rearranging. A mug, a folded dish towel, a set of keys. I told him I was thinking about taking a position in Madison. Beckett waited. There's a hospital there offering better hours, better pay. And we would move. The words settled between them. How long have you been thinking about it? A month. Did Owen know? Since last night. Beckett exhaled slowly. Mara immediately became defensive. I wasn't trying to spring it on him. I didn't say you were. He needs something different. Maybe. He walks past the road where Grant died every time we drive north. He sees rescue trucks and stops talking. He still sleeps with the hall light on some nights. Mara. Her voice broke. I can't keep raising him inside a graveyard. That sentence told Beckett more than everything before it. He looked at her. You want to move? I need to. Those aren't always the same thing. She stared at him. Something like anger appeared. Don't what? Stand in my kitchen and tell me what grief is supposed to look like. I'm not. You get to go back to your cabin when this gets hard. Beckett accepted the hit, Mara continued. I wake up in the bed where Grant slept. I buy groceries at the store where everyone still asks how I'm holding up. I drive past the fire station. I see his friends. Every road in this county has something on it that belongs to him. Her eyes filled. I thought if we left, maybe Owen could breathe. Beckett said quietly, or maybe you could. Mara looked at him for a long time, then sat down. Yes, the word came out almost soundless. Maybe me too. Beckett turned toward the living room. For one automatic second, his mind went to Flint. Scent article. Bike. Trail fine. The old solution arrived before thought. He could drive home, bring Flint, use Owen's shirt, start at the school or here. The dog had found harder trails. Beckett could already see the sequence. Then he stopped. Flint was retired. Not temporarily resting. Not waiting for the next emergency that felt important enough to erase the decision. Retired. And Owen was not simply a scent cone moving through terrain. He was a 16-year-old boy Beckett had spent months listening to, or thought he had. Beckett looked at the empty space where the bike had been. What did he say when you told him? Mara rubbed both hands over her face. He asked if I'd already decided. What did you say? I said no. Was that true? She hesitated. Mostly. Beckett raised an eyebrow. I'd contacted the hospital. To him, that's decided. I know that now. What else? He said I was trying to erase Dad. Beckett nodded. I told him that was cruel. What did he say? That leaving was cruel. Mara looked toward Owen's phone. Then he said if we moved, there'd be nothing left. Beckett's attention sharpened. Nothing where? He didn't say. Think. I am thinking. Anything about Grant? A place? Something they did together? Mara closed her eyes. For almost a minute, neither spoke. Then Beckett remembered something himself, not from an important conversation. That was why it had almost disappeared. A few weeks earlier, during trail marking practice, Owen had complained that one ridge route was boring because the trees blocked the sky. Beckett had asked why that mattered. Owen had said, my dad used to take me up to an old fire lookout when storms rolled in. You could see the whole county from there. Beckett had replied that standing on a metal tower during a thunderstorm sounded like proof Grant had poor survival instincts. Owen had actually laughed, then explained they stayed below the tower when lightning came close. At the time, Beckett had filed the story away as nothing. Now it was not nothing. Old fire lookout. Mara looked up. What? Grant took him to one. Her face changed immediately. Pine Crow. You know it? Yes. Where? Northwest of the old logging boundary. She stood too quickly and caught the chair. Grant used to take him there every fall. Distance? 8 miles by road, maybe 3 more on the old forest track. Could Owen bike it? Mara was already reaching for her keys. Yes. Beckett stopped her. Call Elias. Tell him we have a likely location. Ask him not to flood the area yet. You think he's there? I think it's the first place we check. Why not send everyone? Because if he ran there to get away from being controlled, surrounding him with rescue trucks might not help. Mara stared, then nodded. She called. Beckett drove. Flint remained at the cabin. The fact sat quietly beside him the entire way. For once, he did not feel as though he had forgotten a piece of equipment. He felt as though he had kept a promise. Mara sat in the passenger seat. The road narrowed as they moved north. Wisconsin autumn had begun stripping the forest bare. Gold leaves spun across the pavement. Birch trunks shone white between dark pines. Low clouds hung over the hills, but there was no storm yet, only the cold, unsettled feeling that came before one. Mara kept both hands clasped in her lap. After 10 minutes, she said, "Grant loved weather." Beckett glanced at her. He was one of those people who checked radar even when there wasn't anything coming. Sounds exhausting. A tiny smile appeared. It was. She looked out the window. He used to wake Owen up when thunderstorms came in at night. To watch? From the porch. That's either excellent parenting or terrible judgment. Both. The smile vanished. He made everything feel safe. Beckett understood what she meant. Some people did not remove danger. They changed the shape of fear around it. Mara continued. When Grant died, I thought my job was to keep Owen from hurting worse. So you tightened everything. Yes, schedules. Yes, counselors. Yes, where he went. She looked at him. Yes, Beckett nodded. I did the same thing with Flint. Mara frowned. That's different. Not really. He's a dog. Exactly. Which should have made it easier. He drove through a curve, hands steady on the wheel. I kept thinking if I controlled the workload, the training, the next search, I could keep him from becoming old. Mara was quiet. Beckett continued. I wasn't protecting him from losing something. I was protecting myself. Mara's eyes returned to the forest. After a while, she said, and what am I protecting myself from? Beckett did not answer immediately. Maybe finding out that Owen can hurt and still be okay. The words seemed to land gently but deeply. Mara swallowed. I don't know how to watch that. Neither did I. What changed? Beckett thought about Flint beside Hannah Hart at the command tent. Flint chasing the tennis ball without his harness. Owen crying against the dog in the equipment shed. Turns out not every problem needs an operator. Mara gave him a tired look. That may be the most Navy SEAL way anyone has ever described parenting. That bad? Terrible. Fair. For the first time since Beckett arrived at her house, Mara laughed. It lasted only 2 seconds, but it was real. They found Owen's bicycle at 3:14 p.m. It lay behind an old wooden barrier where the abandoned forest road began, not discarded, hidden. Carefully leaned beneath a cedar where it would not be obvious from the county road. Beckett got out. Mara moved toward it quickly. Owen! Beckett raised one hand. She stopped. The front tire was muddy. One pedal had a fresh scrape. The backpack was gone. So was Grant's jacket. Beckett looked up the forest road. No panic. No chase instinct. Just thought. He planned to walk from here. Mara looked at the trail. How far? Look out. About 2.5 miles. That's manageable. What if he's hurt? Then we deal with that when we know it. Mara's mouth tightened. You're very calm. No, you look calm. That's different. They began walking. Half a mile up the abandoned road, Mara stopped beside an old beech tree. A faded mark had been carved into the bark years earlier. 3 short lines beneath a crooked circle. Beckett would have walked past it. Mara touched it with 2 fingers. Grant did that. Beckett looked closer. What is it? He used to mark places Owen was allowed to stop and wait if they got separated. Her voice caught. Grant called them home marks. Beckett looked farther up the trail. 30 yards away, on another tree, the same symbol appeared. And suddenly the route did not feel like a runaway boy disappearing into the forest. It felt like a child following an old path his father had once taught him was safe. Mara pressed her palm against the weathered mark. He remembered. Beckett said quietly, yeah. Owen had not gone somewhere random. He had gone somewhere that still contained instructions from a man who could no longer give them. The climb steepened. They found another home mark near a switchback, then another beside a spring. Mara began telling Beckett about Grant without being asked, how he whistled when nervous, how he burned grilled cheese because he refused to use low heat, how he once drove 40 miles back to a trailhead because Owen had left a plastic dinosaur there. He said you never abandon a team member, Mara said. Beckett looked at her. The dinosaur? Sergeant Rex. Of course. By the time they reached the base of Pine Crow Ridge, Mara's breathing had become heavier. Beckett slowed without mentioning it. The old lookout appeared through the trees near 4:30. It was not the tall fire tower Beckett had pictured. The original steel structure had been removed years earlier. What remained was a low timber observation platform on a rocky shelf, with an old ranger shelter beside it. 3 walls, a roof, and a bench facing west over miles of forest. Owen sat on that bench. Grant's faded orange rescue jacket hung around his thin shoulders. The sleeves were too long. His backpack rested beside him. He was staring toward the horizon. Mara made a sound in her throat. Beckett caught her arm before she rushed forward. He's okay. She looked at him as if that did not matter enough. He's here. That mattered more. Owen heard them, turned. His face went pale, then angry. I didn't ask you to come. Mara opened her mouth. Beckett quietly said don't. She looked at him. He walked to the shelter, not too close, then sat on the far end of the bench. Owen stared. You going to lecture me? No. Call Elias. He knows we found your bike. So everyone knows. Pretty much. Owen looked toward Mara, who remained several yards away. You told him. I called him because you disappeared. I didn't disappear. Beckett looked around. You hid your bike and left your phone. Owen frowned. Okay. Technically strong argument. Beckett settled back. Wind moved through the ridge. Nobody spoke. 5 minutes. Maybe more. Mara eventually approached. She sat on the rocky ground rather than beside Owen. That surprised him. She did not touch him. Did not demand anything. The three of them watched the forest. Beckett realized this was probably the hardest thing he had done all afternoon. Nothing. He had spent most of his adult life trained to intervene, assess, act, control. Now the correct move was to remain still. Owen finally spoke. I'm not going to Madison. Mara looked at him. I know. No, you don't. You're right. That stopped him, she continued. I don't know what we're doing yet. Owen pulled Grant's jacket tighter around himself. Yes, so you decided. I started deciding without you. He looked away. Mara swallowed. That was wrong. Beckett watched Owen absorb an apology he had not expected. The boy's jaw loosened slightly. Then he said, if we leave, Dad's gone. Mara's face crumpled. No, yes, the house is his. It was our house. The rescue station is his. He worked there. The road. Owen. Her voice shook. Your father is not a road. Owen's eyes filled. You don't get it. I do. No, you want to leave. Mara's tears came quietly. Yes. The answer stunned him. I want to leave because sometimes I can't breathe here either. Owen stared. Mara continued. I drive past Miller Creek and remember the deputy knocking on our door. I hear rescue radios and wait for Grant's voice. I still buy his coffee by accident. She laughed once through tears. Then I come home and remember he hated the brand I keep buying. Owen's face folded. Mara moved closer but still did not touch him. I thought moving would save us from remembering. She shook her head. That was stupid. Owen whispered, I don't want to forget him. You won't. How do you know? Mara looked toward Grant's jacket. Because I've been trying not to remember him every minute for 6 months. And it hasn't worked. Owen started crying. His mother did too. Then Mara said the sentence Beckett would remember, we can leave a place without leaving a person. Owen's breathing broke. He slid off the bench. Mara opened her arms. For 1 second he hesitated. Then he collapsed into them. She held him fiercely. Not like someone trying to keep him from moving. Like someone finally willing to hold him while he did. Beckett stood and walked several yards away. This part belonged to them. When Owen eventually separated from his mother, his eyes were swollen and his nose red. He looked around. Where's Flint? At home. Owen stared at Beckett. You came without him? Apparently I know how to drive alone. That's concerning. Very. Owen wiped his face. Is he okay? He's retired. The boy became completely still. You did it? Yeah. You okay with that? Beckett considered lying. Instead he said, learning. Owen nodded. Good. Beckett glanced at the rescue jacket around his shoulders. Learning seems popular lately. They walked back together. No rescue team met them. Elias had honored Beckett's request and kept the response small once the likely location was identified. At the bike, Owen looked ashamed. I'm in trouble, right? Mara said, an astonishing amount. Okay, but not tonight. Owen nodded. Then, after a second, handed her Grant's jacket. Mara pushed it back. Wear it home. He did. Before returning to the Mercer house, Beckett stopped at his cabin. Flint heard the truck and came out through the screen door. No black harness. No working line, just a tenacious old yellow tennis ball in his mouth. Owen got out. Flint approached at a quick trot. Owen knelt and wrapped both arms around the German shepherd's neck. Beckett watched closely. Months ago, Owen might have buried his face there because he could not breathe. Today he simply hugged his friend. When he stood, he was still emotional. But steady. Flint had not calmed him. Owen had already done something harder. He had spoken. To his mother. To Beckett. To himself. Mara rubbed Flint's head. Thank you anyway. Beckett said, he'll take credit. Flint dropped the ball at her boot. Mara laughed. 3 days later, Beckett met Elias at the rescue station. The older man was repairing a broken buckle at the equipment table. You quitting? Elias asked without looking up. Beckett leaned against the wall, thinking about it. Bad plan. Helpful. You're welcome. Beckett watched 2 younger volunteers practicing radio procedure outside. Flint's done. I know. I'm not taking Ranger. I know. Beckett frowned. You know everything? Only the obvious things. Elias set down the buckle. You think handler is the only useful job here? Beckett said nothing. Elias counted on his fingers. You can train young handlers. Teach volunteers how not to get lost while searching for lost people. Work with the youth outdoor program. Help evaluate K9 teams. Run field scenarios. Beckett folded his arms. I don't need another title. Good. We're short on titles. I'm serious. So am I. Elias looked directly at him. "You spent years learning things most people here will never have time to learn the hard way." "That doesn't mean I'm good at teaching." Elias nodded toward the parking lot. Owen was showing a younger teenager how to properly secure a radio battery, exactly the way Beckett had taught him. Evidence suggests otherwise. Beckett watched. For a long time, he had believed Flint's retirement would remove something essential from his life. Instead, the empty space beside him had begun revealing things he had not noticed while gripping the leash. People, skills, a boy who listened, a team willing to let him remain without asking him to be what he had been. Elias returned to the buckle. No rush. Beckett looked toward the forest beyond the station. For years he had imagined endings as doors closing, a mission complete, a body carried home, the harness removed. But maybe Flint had not closed anything. Maybe the old dog had simply walked through first, turned around, and waited for Beckett to realize there was another way forward. Autumn returned to northern Wisconsin almost exactly 1 year later. The same forests that had once felt like a place Beckett, Rowe, and Hale went to disappear now seemed different, though he knew the trees themselves had not changed. Birches still turned yellow before losing their leaves. Maples still burned red along the ridgelines. Cold morning mist still floated above the lakes until sunlight pushed it apart. What had changed was the man standing beneath them. Beckett was 44 now, though little about his outward appearance suggested surrender to the calendar. At 6'1", he remained broad-shouldered and hard through the frame, with the practical strength of a former Navy SEAL who had never learned to live completely still. His angular face was weathered beneath short, dark stubble. Blue-gray eyes remained observant, though they no longer seemed to be searching every quiet moment for something that might go wrong. His short, dark brown hair was still cut in the same military style, silver now a little more visible at the temples. He still wore the old red and black flannel shirt with the frayed collar and cuffs, a light gray t-shirt beneath it, faded dark blue jeans, worn brown leather work boots, and the military watch that had followed him through more lives than he could comfortably name. Some things had not needed changing. Others had. The county search and rescue program now ran a Saturday outdoor resilience course for teenagers alongside its K-9 training schedule. It was not a foundation. There was no polished building with Beckett's name on a wall. No donors, no cameras. The program operated from the same aging rescue station with its dented lockers, scratched folding tables and coffee machine that made everything taste faintly of burnt plastic. That suited Beckett perfectly. He helped train young K-9 handlers, taught volunteers land navigation, radio discipline, field first aid, and search organization. Worked with teenagers who needed an excuse to spend time outdoors without being asked every 10 minutes how they felt. Elias Ward continued to run the rescue unit, though he had become increasingly fond of handing difficult training sessions to Beckett and then standing back with the expression of a man enjoying revenge. Beckett had accused him of laziness. Elias called it succession planning. Neither believed the other. And Flint? Flint was 10. The German Shepherd no longer wore a working harness. His black and tan coat remained healthy and thick, his body still muscular beneath it, but age had made itself more visible. Silver covered much of his muzzle now. He rose more carefully after long naps. His pace on walks had shortened, and steep ground required thought rather than enthusiasm. His amber eyes, however, had changed very little. Still watchful, still intelligent, still somehow capable of making Beckett feel evaluated. That morning, Flint lay beside the training field in a patch of sun while Beckett demonstrated radio protocol to a group of 6 teenagers. He had no official role. This did not stop him from supervising. One younger volunteer accidentally dropped a packet of jerky. Flint's head came up. Beckett saw it from across the field. "Don't." Flint looked at him. The volunteer looked confused. "I didn't do anything. Wasn't talking to you." Flint slowly lowered his head. The jerky remained where it was, for approximately 4 seconds. Then a young sable German Shepherd came racing across the field and stole it. "Ranger!" someone shouted. Beckett closed his eyes. Ranger was 3 now, taller through the chest than the frantic young dog Beckett had first evaluated, but still carrying more energy than good judgment whenever food was involved. His dark sable coat was short and dense, his amber brown eyes bright beneath upright ears, and the coyote brown working harness fitted his lean, athletic frame. His primary handler was now Mason Cole, a 28-year-old former wildland firefighter with an easy smile and the rangy, long-limbed build of someone used to moving over uneven country. Mason stood just under 6 feet, with sun-browned skin, a narrow, angular face, dark blonde hair clipped short at the sides, and a close-trimmed sandy beard. He was patient with dogs, impatient with equipment, and had developed a habit of apologizing to inanimate objects after swearing at them. He jogged after Ranger. Drop. Ranger swallowed. Mason stopped. That technically solved the problem. Beckett said, "Outstanding handling. I learned from the best. You didn't learn that from me." Good point. Flint watched Ranger with the tired tolerance of an older relative, who had stopped believing the younger generation could be saved. Owen Mercer sat on the edge of a picnic table nearby and laughed. He was 17 now. He had gained nearly an inch in height and some weight through the shoulders, though his frame was still lean. Chestnut brown hair continued to fall toward his forehead no matter what he did with it, and his green-gray eyes still carried more thought than most boys his age wanted anyone to notice. He wore his familiar charcoal hoodie beneath the same light brown canvas jacket, dark jeans and brown hiking boots. The biggest change in Owen was not physical. He occupied space differently. He no longer stood at the outer edge of every group as if preparing to escape. Some days he still did, but not all. He had returned to school. His grades were uneven but improving. He had completed basic first aid certification. He helped younger students in the outdoor program with radios, trail marking, and equipment checks. He was considering becoming an EMT. Some weeks he said park ranger instead. Beckett had told him 17 was too young to make permanent decisions. Owen had asked whether 43 was too old to change one. Beckett had stopped giving age-based advice after that. Mara had changed too. She and Owen never moved to Madison, but they did leave the old family house. Not far, just across town to a smaller place with a maple in the front yard and a kitchen that did not contain Grant Mercer's chair. They kept photographs, Grant's rescue jacket, his old coffee mug, a toolbox, the plastic dinosaur Owen still called Sergeant Rex. But the house was no longer arranged around absence. Mara, now 42, still worked at the regional hospital. Her dark brown shoulder-length hair was often tied low, her hazel eyes still showed the fatigue of nursing shifts, and she still wore her navy quilted jacket over cream sweaters whenever autumn returned. She had not stopped grieving. Neither had Owen. They had simply stopped treating grief as something that required a cure. Beckett thought that was progress, not the kind anyone could put on a chart, the kind that mattered more. Mason brought Ranger over after a successful scent exercise. The young German shepherd panted happily. Flint opened one eye. Ranger approached him, paused, then attempted a play bow. Flint stared. Ranger bounced once. Flint stood. For nearly 30 seconds the old dog joined him. A brief chase, one turn around the maple. Ranger accelerated toward the field. Flint did not. He walked back to the patch of sun and lay down. Owen watched. "That's it?" Beckett nodded. "Retirement has excellent benefits." Owen pointed at Flint. "He worked 30 seconds. Union rules." Mason laughed, then glanced at Beckett. "Can I ask you something?" "You just did." Mason sighed. "I hate when Elias is right about you." "What? Do you miss it?" Beckett knew immediately what he meant. Working a dog. That particular silence between handler and K9 when the rest of the world became scent, terrain, and movement. The trust of a line in the hand. The moment a dog committed to odor and everything inside the handler sharpened with him. Beckett looked at Flint. "Every day." Mason nodded. "You ever want to take another dog?" Beckett thought about Ranger. About Flint years ago. About the part of his own body that still responded when a search call came over the radio. Then he said, "Not everything you miss is something you need to go back to." Mason absorbed that. "Wish somebody told me that about my ex." Beckett looked at him. "I'm not qualified for that." Coward. "Correct." The morning continued. One new teenager had joined the program that week. His name was Daniel Price, 15 years old, thin and tall for his age, with pale skin, straight black hair falling low over his forehead and dark brown eyes that rarely stayed on anyone for more than a second. He wore a black sweatshirt beneath a faded denim jacket and held his arms close to his body as if trying to take up less space. Daniel's mother had enrolled him after he stopped attending basketball practice and began missing school following his older sister's hospitalization after a serious car accident. Nobody called it grief because she had survived. Beckett had learned that people could grieve things that were still alive. Normal life, safety, trust, the future they assumed would happen. Daniel stood apart from the group near a pine tree, exactly where Owen might once have stood. Flint lifted his head. Beckett saw the dog notice the boy. A year ago, Beckett might have watched Flint, waited to see what the dog did, used him as the bridge. This time Beckett looked at Flint, then at Daniel, and understood. He handed the radio in his hand to Mason. "Take over." Mason frowned. "I was doing fine avoiding responsibility." Character building. Beckett walked toward Daniel. The boy noticed him coming and immediately looked away. Beckett did not ask whether he was okay, did not ask why he was there, did not tell him the program was safe. He sat on a low log several feet away. Daniel looked sideways at him. Beckett rested his forearms on his knees. "I'm Beckett. I know. That saves time." Daniel said nothing. Beckett looked toward the field. "I'm gonna sit here a while." The teenager shrugged. Okay, so Beckett sat. No lesson, no pressure. The silence stretched. Across the field, Owen had been watching. He lowered himself beside Flint. The old dog barely moved. Owen scratched the silver fur beneath his jaw. He learned slow. Flint exhaled heavily. Owen nodded. "I know. I think so too." Daniel finally spoke after several minutes. "My sister hates everybody helping her." Beckett kept looking toward the trees. "Maybe. She yells at my mom." "Okay. She yelled at me." Beckett nodded once. Daniel swallowed. "She wasn't like that before." There it was. Not a confession, not a breakthrough, just one door opening half an inch. Beckett did not step through. He left it open. People can be different when they're hurt. Daniel looked at him. "Does that mean they go back?" Beckett's eyes moved briefly toward Flint asleep in the sun. "No." Daniel's face tightened. Beckett continued. "Sometimes they become something else. Better? Sometimes. Worse? Sometimes. That sucks." "Yeah." Daniel looked almost surprised by the answer. Then, slowly, he sat on the other end of the log. Across the field, Owen smiled. Not because Daniel was fixed. He wasn't. Because Beckett had finally learned the lesson Flint had been teaching without words for years. When someone is hurting, being present can be more useful than being impressive. The anniversary of Grant Mercer's death came 3 weeks later. Mara did not organize a memorial. Owen did not want one. Instead, the three of them planned to walk to Pine Crow Lookout. Beckett brought Flint. The morning was bright and cold. Leaves covered the old forest road in gold and brown. Owen walked ahead beside Mara, Grant's faded rescue jacket tied around his waist because the climb warmed him quickly. Beckett and Flint followed. The old German shepherd made the first mile easily. The second took longer. Near the base of the final ridge, Flint stopped. Not dramatically. He simply stood beside the trail and looked upward. The last section climbed steeply over broken rock. Beckett knew Flint could probably manage it, slowly, with effort. That phrase had once been enough reason to continue. If he can, he should. Not anymore. Beckett crouched. "You done?" Flint panted. Owen and Mara stopped farther up. "You okay?" Owen called. Beckett looked at the ridge, then at Flint. "We're staying here." Owen started back down. Beckett raised a hand. "No." "You sure? Go." Owen looked at Flint, then at Beckett. For a second, Beckett saw the old instinct in the boy too. The belief that nobody should be left behind. Beckett smiled faintly. "We're not lost." Mara touched Owen's shoulder. "Come on." They continued uphill. Beckett found a place beneath a cedar overlooking the lower valley. He sat on the ground. Flint settled beside him with a slow sigh. For years, Beckett had believed leadership meant reaching the top first and getting everyone else there safely. Today, he watched Owen and Mara disappear over the ridge without him and felt no failure. They did not need him for this part. That was not rejection. It was success. He ran one hand over Flint's silver muzzle. "Sorry it took me so long." Flint shifted closer, rested his head against Beckett's leg. No miraculous answer. No gesture loaded with human meaning. Just weight, warmth, trust. Beckett looked through the cedar branches. "I thought keeping you working meant I wasn't giving up on you." Flint closed his eyes. "Turns out I was just bad at letting things change." The dog sighed. "Yeah, very judgmental." Above them, Mara and Owen reached the lookout. Beckett could not see them clearly. Only two small figures on the ridge. Owen stood at the railing, Mara beside him. They did not need Beckett to know what they were saying. Maybe they were talking about Grant. Maybe they were not. That mattered too. The dead should not have to occupy every conversation in order to remain loved. Beckett leaned back against the tree. Flint slept. Months earlier, the sight of the dog resting while others continued without him would have felt unbearable. Now it looked peaceful. The afternoon sun had turned gold by the time everyone returned to Beckett's cabin. Owen sat at the outdoor table repairing a handheld radio Elias had deliberately given him because the battery contact had become unreliable. Deliberately was Owen's accusation. Elias claimed the radio had developed a spontaneous educational opportunity. Mara had driven into town to pick up dinner. Flint lay stretched across the porch boards in the sun. His old black working harness hung inside the cabin near the mudroom. Beckett had never hidden it, never framed it either. It was simply there. A piece of equipment from a life that had mattered, no more sacred than his old boots, no less. A rescue truck moved along the distant county road. Its engine faded between the trees. Several minutes later, Ranger and Mason passed the cabin on foot, returning from a short conditioning trail. Ranger saw Flint and pulled hopefully toward the porch. Mason stopped. "Go ahead." Ranger trotted over. Flint lifted his head. Ranger placed a stick beside him. Flint looked at the stick, then at Ranger, then laid his head back down. Owen laughed. "Rejected." Mason nodded solemnly. "Harsh but fair." Ranger picked up the stick and ran toward Owen instead. The world continued. That was what Beckett had once feared most. That one day Flint would no longer work and the world would continue as if nothing important had happened. He had been wrong about what continuation meant. It did not erase what came before. Ranger did not erase Flint. Owen growing did not erase Grant. Beckett teaching did not erase the years he spent handling a K9. New purpose did not insult old purpose. It honored it by refusing to demand that one chapter carry the entire weight of a life. Beckett came out of the cabin carrying 2 metal cups of water. He put one beside Owen. The teenager looked suspicious. "Water, you're welcome. I thought maybe coffee. You're 17. So coffee makes you annoying. I'm already annoying." "Exactly, we've reached capacity." Owen smiled and returned to the radio. Beckett sat on the porch step. Flint's eyes opened. The old dog looked at him. Beckett reached down and scratched behind one ear. For years he had imagined that a working dog's final command should be worthy of everything that came before. Something dramatic. Find, track, hold, go. A last search through snow. A final life saved. A moment people might tell stories about afterward. He had misunderstood the entire thing. The last command was not heroic. It required no harness, no radio, no field team. No one had to witness it. Beckett looked at the silver muzzle resting near his knee. The words did not even need to be spoken aloud. They were simply permission. "You can rest now." Flint already knew. That had always been the strange part. The dog had accepted age long before Beckett did. Accepted younger dogs, accepted slower mornings, accepted days with no mission, accepted the joy of a tennis ball as easily as he had once accepted the weight of a harness. Beckett had been the one fighting, the one who thought usefulness and worth were the same thing, the one who believed stopping meant disappearing. He looked toward Owen, toward Ranger, toward the forest where another generation of handlers would learn trails Beckett no longer needed to run himself. Then back at Flint. "You were right," he murmured. Flint's ear moved. Beckett smiled. "Don't get used to hearing that." The dog settled deeper into sleep. And for once, Beckett did not feel the need to wake him. A soldier was still a man when the war ended. A working dog was still family after the harness came off. A grieving boy did not need to be repaired before he deserved patience. And love, Beckett finally understood, was not always the thing that urged someone to keep fighting. Sometimes love was the thing that sat beside them after the fight was over. Sometimes it was the hand that loosened its grip. Sometimes it was the voice that finally said, "You have done enough. You are still enough. Rest." The late afternoon light moved slowly across the porch. Flint slept beneath it, and Beckett let him. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder, bright signs, or impossible events. Sometimes they arrive quietly, in the loyalty of an old dog, in the courage to stop holding on, in the right person sitting beside us when words are no longer enough. Beckett spent years believing that purpose meant serving, protecting, fixing, and carrying more than everyone else. Flint taught him something gentler. A life does not lose its value when a mission ends. The same is true for us. There are seasons when we are strong and seasons when we must rest. There are moments when we lead and moments when we need someone else to lead. There are people we cannot save, losses we cannot undo, and changes we cannot stop. But God can still bring meaning out of those seasons. A closed chapter does not mean the story is over. Sometimes what feels like the end of our usefulness is only the beginning of a different purpose. Sometimes the person we think we are helping is actually the one God is using to teach us how to heal. And sometimes a faithful animal reminds us of a truth we were too proud, too tired, or too wounded to see. You do not have to keep proving your worth to be loved. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who may need that reminder today. Tell us in the comments where you are watching from, and whether there has ever been a person or an animal in your life who seemed to arrive exactly when you needed them most. And if you believe stories about loyalty, second chances, faith, and the extraordinary bond between veterans and their dogs still matter, subscribe to the channel and join us for the next journey. May God bless you, protect your family, give strength to those carrying burdens in silence, comfort those living with loss, and bring peace to every faithful companion growing old beside the people they love. And wherever you are watching from, may God remind you that your purpose is not over simply because one chapter has ended.